Okay, everyone. Good afternoon. Nice to see you all. We're going to get started. Let me note that we are going to kick off today with a special public meeting, as you all know, and then we will move on to our briefing. But before we do that, let's call the roll. I'm going to ask the secretary to do the honors.
Good afternoon. This is a City Planning Commission special public meeting held remotely through the NYC Engage portal. Today is Monday, April 25th, 2022. I will now call the roll. Chair Garodnick.
Here.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Here.
Commissioner Burney.
Here.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Here.
Commissioner Dewick.
Here.
Commissioner Edie.
Here.
Commissioner Goodrich.
Here.
Commissioner Levin.
Here.
Commissioner Marin. Commissioner Ortiz.
Here.
Commissioner Ramprashad.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. As I noted, before we get to our usual review session agenda, we have a special vote today on a proposed building that aims to bring 900 new homes to 145th Street in Harlem. And let me just say one or two words about this. First of all, I just want to observe that New York City, we remain in an acute housing crisis where rent pressures are felt by millions of New Yorkers every day. And as New York City recovers from COVID, it is vital that we do more to create housing. The latest estimates show New York City as home to 8.5 million people, but we are not up to the number of units that we need to be able to match what historically has been, with a small exception over the past period of pandemic, a fair amount of growth. Without new homes, both affordable and market rate, we will not be able to dig ourselves out of this crisis. 145 Lenox Avenue, which is the project we are voting on today, is an opportunity to create 900 homes in one shot, enough for nearly 2,000 families. That 2,000 individuals, that includes more than 200 stable and permanently affordable homes for lower income families. The building would be located in an accessible and transit-rich area, more easily connecting residents to jobs, their community, and their city. And I will note that on top of creating new homes and affordable ones, the developer will also be required to rehabilitate the nearby Brigadier General Charles Young Playground. In short, I believe we need to take every viable opportunity to put a dent in New York City's housing crisis. This is one of those opportunities, and I encourage the Commission to vote in favor of this project. So I will go to the Secretary to call this item, and we're going to move on from there.
The first item is the report section on page 1, Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 1 through 9, 145 Museum of Civil Rights, CD 10, calendar number 1, C220134ZMM, calendar number 2, N220135ZRM, calendar number 3, C220136ZSM, calendar number 4, C220137ZSM has been withdrawn. Calendar number 5, C220137AZSM. Calendar number 6, C220142ZSM. Calendar number 7, N220138ZCM. Calendar number 8, N220139ZCM. Calendar number 9, N220143ZCM. In the matter of applications for zoning map and zoning text amendments, special permits, and grant of certifications. For favorable reports on calendars numbers 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, and adoption on calendar numbers 7, 8, and 9. Chair Garodnick.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
145th Street and Lenox Avenue is the intersection of two of the widest thoroughfares in the city, and certainly in Upper Manhattan. It is an intersection that, in my opinion, is befitting of greater density than certainly what is there now and what is allowed, or what would be allowed in an as-of-right zoning scenario. I agree with the chair that the potential for greater housing, a greater volume of housing there is certainly a benefit that should not be overlooked, and the possibility of up to 282 units of permanently affordable housing is an opportunity that I don't think we should forego. I hope that the developer will continue in response to the critique of the Manhattan Borough President with the discussions with HPD to hopefully increase the number of affordable units that can be realized on this site. But I do think that the possibility of affordable housing in that kind of density is a significant opportunity. In addition, the possibility of an urban civil rights museum located in Harlem would be a source of both cultural enrichment, not only to the city and the state, but to the nation. So I think that is a presence that would bring not only economic activity to the community, but a source of cultural enrichment and empowerment. This is a complex building proposal, but I think it yields great potential, and I think it's an opportunity that should be seized upon. Accordingly, I vote yes.
Commissioner Burney,
Concurring with the comments of the chair and vice chair, I vote yes.
Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner Duick,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Also echoing the comments of the chair and vice chair, I vote yes.
Commissioner Goodrich,
I'm voting no, and I want to explain why. I'm a native New Yorker, and although I'm a native Brooklynite, I'm very familiar with the area in Harlem, and I'm also a tenants' rights attorney. And having been in this city, I believe that as New Yorkers, as a progressive city, we shouldn't accept any crumbs. And to me, this is a crumb. We're not even talking about 50% of affordable housing. Every day I see people getting evicted, and the number one reason that they're getting evicted is because of the lack of affordable housing. So if we're going to have a development in Harlem, of all places, the renaissance of and history of Black culture, and I want to get to the naming of it in a bit, then it should at least have real affordable housing, not crumbs. The second part that I just want to say that I was very dismayed about is when the project came here, the name of the project is called the Museum of Civil Rights. And I was really excited about that. I'm very, as I said before, I'm a lover of Black culture and understand the history of New York City and Harlem. I felt frustrated that the fact that this was named, the project was named the Museum of Civil Rights, because I really felt like it was a smokescreen, because in fact, projects just like this are extremely, they operate to push Black people out of this city. So I'm voting against this. And I would also say in the future that we be careful about what we're naming projects, because it's not really a project about the Museum for Civil Rights. The Museum for Civil Rights is one very small part of this, but we're talking about over 800 units spanning of half a block or more than a block, really. And this really is about affordable housing. And that's why my vote is for no. And I will just say that in the future, I really would hope that when we're making votes about affordable housing, that we don't accept crumbs and that we let developers know that it's okay to work with the city to build more affordable housing. So my vote is no.
Commissioner Levin,
I found myself in agreement with much as that's been said in favor and in opposition to this proposal. And that's been my frame of mind watching this move through the public review process. I fully agree that with the chair that it is that we are in a housing crisis and that it is vital that we do more to create housing. And this is a prime site on which to do it. This area is appropriate for high-rise residential development. But I find that the amount of zoning that's proposed here is somewhat out of sync with the rest of the work that we've done in East Harlem and in Central Harlem. And more importantly, I find that the development program as presented by the applicant, is full of promises, but remains inchoate. It really lacks the specificity with regard particularly to the museum, as Commissioner Goodrich just described, that we typically see in a zoning as complex as this. The community board and the borough president have been passionate about their desire to see more affordable housing here and deeper levels of affordable housing, and most importantly, more family-sized housing units. What's proposed here is only 27% of the units would be suitable for families. I don't think that's wise planning on our part. So I really hope that this project can be further shaped as it moves along to the city council, but for me right now, it's not ready for approval, and I vote no.
Commissioner Ortiz.
I appreciate the comments of Commissioner Goodrich, and I also, understand the position that, the city and the department finds itself in. I would have to say I'm ultimately swayed by, the recognition that we really do need to increase the supply of housing, both affordable and market rate throughout the city. That's going to be part of what helps solve the housing crisis writ large. So I vote yes.
Commissioner Ramprashad.
Yes.
Favorable reports have been adopted on calendar numbers 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, and calendar numbers 7, 8, and 9 have been adopted.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Is there any other business before the commission for this special meeting today?
No, Chair Garodnick. The time is 1:14 p.m.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much. And this special meeting is now adjourned. We are now going to move on. We're just going to take a 30-second break here. And we're going to move on to the review session of today. Here we go. Look at that. Just like that, we changed the slides and we're into our next level. So thank you all, commissioners, for being here. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, other than what you just saw a moment ago, which was a special public session for the purpose of voting, today and normally on Mondays, we have our public review session among the commissioners of city planning, where the staff of the Department of City Planning brief commissioners on applications that are either about to start the city's official land use process, known as ULURP, or they're going to have a hearing this Wednesday. So for the projects that are starting the process, and we have a number of them today, we will certify their application and kick off ULURP. For those that are having a hearing on Wednesday, staff of the Department of City Planning will prepare the commission for the items that will be heard. So let's start with certification. Today, we're going to kick off the review process for more than 3,700 homes, many of them affordable, many near transit. It includes an HPD project in East New York to construct 5 buildings with hundreds of affordable apartments. Innovation Queens in Astoria, which is a proposal for 2,700 homes, several hundred permanently affordable shops, restaurants, grocery store, etc., to be built over 5 city blocks. I will note this one has gotten a fair amount of attention in the community and the press, and we expect a lively debate as it goes through ULURP. And I also want to take this moment to encourage the applicant team here to be thoughtful and thorough in its approach to public engagement during its community board hearing and beyond, and to make sure that New Yorkers from all backgrounds are seen and heard. We're also going to be certifying a project in Mount Hope in the Bronx, a mixed-use building near the Gowanus Canal in Brooklyn, and a NYCHA proposal at Campos Plaza on East 14th Street, right across from Stuytown, as well as a number of others. Then we're going to get ready for public hearings on 2 proposals for Manhattan and Queens together, 2 total, 1 for Manhattan, 1 for Queens, 10 o'clock on Wednesday. In Hell's Kitchen, HPD on Wednesday will tell us about its plans for a mixed-use building with affordable homes, including for the formerly homeless, will include retail and new offices for the MTA. And in the neighborhood of Forest Hills, Queens, we'll have a hearing on our proposal for new apartments near the 67th Avenue subway station. So there's a lot to do today, and I'm glad you all are here. So let's get started. Edwin, would you like to get us going?
Absolutely, and thank you, Chair Garodnick. Good afternoon, commissioners. Good afternoon, all. Welcome to the New York City Planning Commission review session for Monday, April 25th, 2022. The time is 1:16 p.m. and a quorum is present. Our first item on our agenda is a certification of a zoning map and zoning text amendments and special permits in Queens Community District 1. Our presenter is Stephen Everett.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Wonderful. Next slide, please. This is a private application for a rezoning and additional actions affecting an area located in Astoria, Queens Community District 1. The project area encompasses 5 blocks bounded by 35th Avenue, 43rd Street and Northern Boulevard, 36th Avenue, and 37th Street. Next slide, please. The applicant partnership includes Kaufman Astoria Studios, Bedrock Real Estate Partners, and Silverstein Properties. And together, the team proposes a mixed-use development totaling approximately 2.7 million square feet, and that comprises more than 2,800 residential units, of which more than 700 would be affordable pursuant to MIH, nearly 200,000 square feet of commercial development, an additional 230,000 square feet of office space, and more than 2 acres of public open space. Next slide, please. The development partnership again includes Kaufman Astoria Studios, Silverstein Properties, and Bedrock Real Estate Partners. Kaufman is New York City's oldest operating film and TV studio. It's a key partner in the adjacent Kaufman Arts District, and its studio is located 2 blocks from this project area. Silverstein has many years of development experience in the city. It's been a key developer on large-scale mixed-use projects, including World Trade Center redevelopment, and it recently purchased a development site in Astoria near this project area. And Bedrock Real Estate Partners focuses typically on large-scale mixed-use developments nationwide, and is an investment partner in the United Artists Cinemas, the 14-screen movie theater in this project area. Next slide, please. The project area is located in southern Astoria, the majority of which is located to the north, as this map indicates. Immediately southwest of the project area is an industrial business zone, and beyond that to the southwest is the Dutch Kills Special Subdistrict and the Queens Plaza Special Subdistrict in Long Island City. All of these front on Northern Boulevard, a major Queens thoroughfare. And south of Northern Boulevard is Sunnyside Yard, for which a master plan was released in 2020. West of Steinway Street is the Kaufman Arts District, a collaboration of local organizations involved in the creative arts that anchor the area as a cultural destination and a center for the creative industries. It is led by Kaufman Astoria Studios, an applicant partner in this proposal. Next slide, please. The majority of the project area is located in an M11 zoning district established in 1961, and block fronts fronting on Steinway Street were rezoned in 1998 to a C4 2A district to support a commercial corridor. To the immediate north, this portion of Astoria is primarily zoned R5, with east and west commercial corridors in R6 contextual districts with commercial overlays. And this map again indicates the proximity of the project area to the Long Island City Special District and subdistricts fronting on Northern Boulevard immediately to the southwest. Next slide, please. The project area is well located with respect to transportation options. Shown at this scale are the subway lines traversing Western Queens. Specifically, the project area is located 1 block from the Steinway Street M and R subway station to the north, a 10-minute walk to the 36th Avenue N and W station to the west, and between an 18 and 26-minute walk from Queensboro Plaza, Queens Plaza, and Queens Bridge stations, all of which are southwest. Next slide, please. As this slide more clearly shows, the project area is again located predominantly in an M11 district on either side of Steinway which is mapped with a C4 to A district. M11 districts facilitate light industrial and some commercial uses at 1.0 FAR. C4 to A districts facilitate commercial and residential uses at 3.0 FAR. And the R5 district immediately to the north typically comprises 3- and 4-story row houses. And the R6B north of that is typical of east and west commercial streets in Astoria with commercial overlays. West and southeast of the project area are M15 districts, which facilitate light industrial uses at 5.0 FAR. Next slide, please. This neighborhood context land use map shows the mix of uses located in the immediately surrounding area, from lower density residential uses to the north to the commercial corridors along 35th and 36th Avenues, and the mixed use character of the neighborhood to the south, including warehousing, light industrial, commercial, automotive, and residential uses. Next slide, please. Specific and representative uses in this area include, along the 35th Avenue corridor, there's PS 166 Henry Gradstein, serving pre-K through 5th grade. There's the Frank Sinatra School of the Arts High School. There's Kaufman Astoria Studios and the Museum of the Moving Image. Along Northern Boulevard is the Food Bazaar and Wind Depot, both larger retail footprint stores with ample parking. And 4401 Northern Boulevard, a site that was recently rezoned to R7X with a commercial overlay that Silverstein Properties, another member of this applicant team, intends to develop. Within the project area, there's the United Artists Cinema, PC Richard & Son Appliance Store, the Department of Parks and Recreation Playground 35, and Harley Davidson, all of which we'll see street view photos of as we walk through the project area. Next slide, please. The project area consists of the entirety of 5 blocks, including 641, 668, 669, 670, and 671. Block 641, the westernmost block, is primarily occupied by the 2-story United Artists Cinema with rooftop parking. Block 668 is occupied primarily by the PC Richard & Sons Appliance Store with a large at-grade parking facility fronting on 35th Avenue. Block 669 contains Playground 35, a city park that features playground equipment, including swings, picnic tables, and benches, and primarily serves children and families in the area. Block 670 contains a 2-story warehouse operated by the Queensboro Farms Dairy, and the remainder of the block contains 1-story warehouse and auto repair facilities. And Block 671 contains primarily 1-story auto showroom and dealership and auto repair facilities. These include Showroom Auto, a Subaru dealership, and Harley Davidson motorcycles located along the 42nd Street and Northern Boulevard frontages. The development site would comprise portions of the 5 blocks, and for reference and ease of description, these are labeled blocks A through E. Each development site fronts on the south side of 35th Avenue and extends to varying depths across each block. Next slide, please. Steinway Street, which extends from Northern Boulevard on the south side of the project area to Berrien Boulevard, north of the project area, is a major commercial corridor. The streets east and west of Steinway Street, within and adjacent to the project area, are local narrow streets, 60 feet in width, and 35th Avenue and 36th Avenue are wide 2-way streets carrying traffic east and west to and from Northern Boulevard, which is a major 100-foot wide 6-lane thoroughfare running generally southwest to northeast through the borough. In addition to subway transit access, there are 4 bus lines serving this immediate area, and 2 are diagrammed here. The Q66 bus runs along 35th Avenue and Northern Boulevard. The Q101 runs along Steinway Street. The Q104 runs along Broadway, 2 blocks north of the project area. And finally, the Q102 runs along 31st Street, 6 blocks west of the project area. There are also multiple city bike stations in this immediate vicinity. Next slide, please. We'll take a short walking tour of the project area, beginning with Block A. This image shows the United Artists Cinemas, and the commission will note the blank walls with no entries or facade articulation at this location, which creates a very uninviting pedestrian experience. Next slide, please. The main entrance for the cinema is located mid-block on 38th Street, shown here, and otherwise has similar conditions on this street wall as we saw in the prior image. There's little facade articulation and no street activity, both of which create uninviting pedestrian experiences. Next slide, please. This image shows the main entrance to the PC Richard & Son appliance store with its large parking lot in the foreground. Next slide, please. This image shows the row house buildings fronting on 38th Street and 36th Avenue at the southern portion of Block B that are not part of the development site. And I'll note that none of the buildings in this image, though subject to the proposed rezoning, would be expected to be redeveloped as a function of the actions proposed. Next slide, please. This image shows Playground 35, which is owned and operated by the Department of Parks and Recreation. It was recently renovated and contains amenities primarily serving children in the immediate area. I'll also draw your attention to the brown perforated wall along the southern and eastern sides of the playground in this image. The Parks Department erected this wall because of the surrounding parking uses, and this applicant has expressed interest in working with Parks to improve this condition and replace portions of the wall as a function of this application. Next slide, please. This image shows the single and two-story warehouse character of Block C. Next slide, please. And this image shows a view of the project area looking south from 35th Avenue at a car dealership. Next slide, please. On Block D, this image shows the single-story industrial and automotive warehousing character. Next slide, please. As well as the automotive character of the portion of project area fronting on Northern Boulevard. Next slide, please. On Block E, this image shows the Harley Davidson fronting on 43rd Street and Northern Boulevard. Next slide, please. And this image shows the automotive character of the project area at 35th Avenue and 43rd Street. Next slide, please. For surrounding context, this image shows that, as an example, there's a range of loft-style buildings in the surrounding area from 3 to 6 stories. And the Museum of the Moving Image is located in the building on the left. Next slide, please. This image shows the surrounding context looking north from 35th Avenue along 43rd Street with row house buildings on the left, multifamily walk-up buildings, and the auto dealership on the right. Next slide, please. And this image is looking south from 36th Avenue, the southern portion of the project area, at a multifamily walk-up building with ground floor commercial uses on the right there. Next slide, please. According to the applicant, the land use rationale for the proposed development is to align with the opportunities that the convergence of these corridors, transit options, and surrounding districts and uses provide to facilitate a mixed-use development and bolster services to a local and area-wide population, while bringing new economic development and housing opportunities to the development site. 35th Avenue is shown here as a community-serving commercial corridor along the northern border of the project area. Bisecting it is Steinway Street, and of note is the Steinway-Astoria Partnership, a business improvement district that stretches from 28th Avenue to the north down to 35th Avenue at its southern end, immediately across the street from this project area. It is comprised of more than 300 businesses, including retail, eating and drinking establishments, and other dry goods stores. Historically, this corridor was comprised primarily of dry goods retailers and has struggled in certain locations to evolve into an identity that serves the shopping habits of the current consumer. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, this slide. Northern Boulevard in red here serves a larger area and is defined, as we saw in the previous land use maps and project area photos, by automotive, commercial, and regionally attractive uses. And the applicant's team proposed building and open space layout is intended to anchor this context. Next slide, please. As this diagram shows, to achieve that building and open space layout, the team envisioned a series of principles to guide decisions across the development site. And I will reorient the commission here. We're now facing southeast with Block A and 35th Avenue in the immediate foreground. The team intends to vary building heights across the development site, stepping up from the periphery to maximum building heights in the center on Block C and along Northern Boulevard. It would anchor 35th Avenue and Steinway Streets, as well as Northern Boulevard, with commercial and office uses, provide a mix of uses on each block, and provide access to arts, cultural learning opportunities, health and wellness facilities, and other services, and increase foot traffic in the area to better support existing businesses. Finally, the team intends to provide ample public open space. Next slide, please. Looking at a bit more detail, the team seeks to activate commercial corridors and increase foot traffic by providing local retail and community facility uses along 35th Avenue and Steinway Street, as well as frame the new open spaces, which are shown in green here. Next slide, please. They also seek to provide access to multiple arts, gallery, community, health and wellness facilities throughout the development site, including a community hub adjacent to a large open space on Block C, urgent care facility on Block D, and learning centers and gallery spaces on Blocks A and B. Next slide, please. The applicants propose to redevelop the site with a series of mixed-use buildings and publicly accessible open spaces. And now I'll reorient the commission once more. We're now looking north with Block A on the left and 35th Avenue at the top. There would be 13 buildings in total, 3 on Block A, 2 on Block B, as well as C, 3 on Block D, and 3 on Block E. Overall, site plan design would facilitate the guiding principles we just covered. And I'll note in plan here that the buildings would also frame the proposed open spaces on each block, which we saw in the previous diagram. Next slide, please. According to the applicant, the intention is to complement the mission of the Kaufman Arts District and anchor the neighborhood context by creating a series of arts and cultural venues, including a multi-purpose arts cultural center, a re-envisioned multiplex movie theater, galleries, artist workshops, and tech and general office space. The project would also include eating and drinking establishments, a grocery store, and other local retail, service, and community facility uses. This would support the new residential population, as well as the existing businesses and residential community, and again, anchor the Steinway Street and 35th Avenue commercial corridors. Shown in red, the commercial uses would generally frame 35th Avenue and Steinway, and moving south across the blocks, the ground floor uses would comprise typically community facility uses and residential entries and lobbies moving south. Next slide, please. A series of 8 public open spaces would link these blocks. Amenities would include public seating, multi-purpose lawns, water features, landscaped areas, planters, shade trees, a dog park, as well as immersive playscape for children, open markets, kiosks, art installations, sculptures, and enhanced streetscapes. Programming in the public open spaces would include exhibits, markets, performances, and other events. One additional private open space is proposed for building tenants on Block A, represented by location 9 in this diagram. And in total, there will be more than 2 acres of public open space. There would be no mid-block crossings, but the open spaces are meant to be visually accessible across the 5 blocks from and through locations 1, 4, 6, 7, and 8 in this diagram. And I'll note that the open space on Block D, which is location 7, would be open at the ground level, but covered by the 2-story cinema above it. Next slide, please. I'll reorient the commission once more. We're again facing southeast with Block A and 35th Avenue in the foreground. For the proposed program, non-residential buildings and building segments would be located across the development site and provide for ground floor anchoring uses discussed in the prior diagram, as well as a 10-story office tower located at the northwest portion of the development site on Block A, shown in purple, a community hub fronting on the large open space proposed for Block C, shown in blue, the cinema shown in red on Block D, an office building bases along Northern Boulevard, also shown in purple. Above ground floor and building bases would be residential uses on each of the 5 blocks, located in buildings ranging from 9 stories on block A to 27 stories on blocks C and D. Overall, the proposed program would include more than 2,100 units of market rate housing and more than 700 units of affordable housing pursuant to MIH. There'd be, again, nearly 200,000 square feet of commercial space, including the 60,000 square foot cinema, and an additional 230,000 square feet of office space, and more than 100,000 square feet of community facility space, including the 60,000 square feet community hub on block C. Parking is proposed on the cellar level of each block for a total of approximately 1,390 spaces. Next slide, please. Looking at that same diagram, now from Northern Boulevard and block E in the foreground, we can more clearly see here the context along 36th Avenue and Northern Boulevard with the office and residential towers on blocks D and E. Next slide, please. To facilitate the development, the applicants propose a series of actions. These would include zoning text amendments, zoning map amendments, special permits pursuant to a large-scale general development, and special permits to permit certain retail uses greater than 10,000 square feet of floor area on zoning lots A through E. We'll discuss these in a bit more detail now. Next slide, please. Again, the project area comprises the entirety of the 5 blocks to which the rezoning and text amendments would apply. The development site would only include those properties controlled by the applicant team. In total, there are 43 tax lots in these 5 blocks. 21 are not controlled by the applicant. Those are shown in yellow, and 22 would be controlled by the applicant. These comprise the development site, and in addition to the rezoning and text amendments, would also be subject to the special permits proposed. Development site is shown in the salmon color here. Next slide, please. The applicants propose zoning text amendments, first to create a special MX24 mixed use district, which would allow for the pairing of residential and manufacturing districts to be mapped with the zoning map amendments. They also seek to modify zoning resolution section 74/7045, which would permit modification of parking and loading regulations. And they seek to map MIH option 1 in Appendix F across the entirety of the project area. Next slide, please. I will note here that MIH areas 4, 6, and 7 in this diagram already exist. This proposal would map MIH option 1 across the entirety of the project area, shown here in the pound sign. Option 1 requires affordable housing to be provided equivalent to 25% of the residential floor area, developed at an average of 60% of the area median income, with 10% at 40% AMI. Next slide, please. The applicants propose to rezone the project area with 4 paired MR districts, as well as create the special MX24 district that would facilitate this pairing. Next slide, please. The goal of the MX district pairing would be to provide for a wider range of compatible uses than would otherwise be allowed in manufacturing, commercial, or residential districts alone. And here it would allow for a range of retail, office, commercial, and light industrial uses, while the project area's residential districts would allow for a full range of residential and community facility uses. The 4 paired districts are proposed in the following manner. A lower density district, the M14R7X, would be mapped across from the R5 district on the north side of 35th Avenue. Across from the R5 district with lower density residential uses immediately across 35th Avenue. A higher density district with residential uses in the M15 and R91 district will be mapped along Northern Boulevard to support the proposed towers and office program there. An M14R9 district will be mapped to support the mix of uses and building designs along 35th Avenue and 36th Avenue, as well as Steinway Street. And an M14 R73 district will be mapped in the resulting lower density mid-block conditions. The regulations of each of the districts is shown in the table in the lower right, with FARs ranging from 6 to 9 and maximum building heights ranging from 185 feet to 280 feet. Together, the mapping of these districts would facilitate the proposed development at an overall FAR of 7.1. Next slide, please. On the development site, the applicant seeks a series of special permits pursuant to a large-scale general development. Within a large-scale general development, the CPC may modify underlying zoning districts for increased flexibility of the proposal. Floor area, dwelling units, lot coverage, and open space can be shifted on a development site without regard for zoning lot lines or zoning district boundaries. To establish a large-scale general development, the development site must be located in a commercial or manufacturing district and be a minimum of 1.5 acres in size. And to grant large-scale general development special permits, the CPC must find that primarily the redistribution of floor area and other conditions must result in a superior site plan and relationship between the development site and neighborhood context. Next slide, please. With respect to bulk modifications, the CPC may permit primarily two things, both of which the applicant is seeking in this proposal. That includes the distribution of floor area, rooming units, dwelling units, lot coverage, total required open space, without regard, again, for zoning lot lines or district boundaries, and the location of buildings without regard to the applicable yard, court, distance between buildings, or height and setback regulations. Next slide, please. To grant such a special permit, the CPC must make a series of findings, primarily related to number 1, that the proposed redistribution and proposal must make for a superior site plan and relationship to the community than the underlying regulations would allow. Next slide, please. This diagram shows a bulk waiver diagram indicating that across all 5 blocks, the applicant would seek to shift floor area, as well as seek special permit bulk waivers related to height and setback, rear yard or rear yard equivalent, and minimum distance between buildings. Next slide, please. With the proposed zoning districts, 9 of the 13 proposed buildings would be allowed at the heights proposed as of right pursuant to the regulations of the districts proposed. Only 4 would not, and the applicant seeks relief in these locations on blocks B, C, D, and E. Next slide, please. Broadly, the waivers would allow for distribution of density on wide streets, including 35th Avenue, Steinway Street, and the framing of the central open space on block C. These waivers would apply to single towers on each of blocks B, C, D, and E, as well as rear yard waivers on blocks B, C, D, and E. According to the applicant, the height waivers would help create a unique and distinct building form that supports good urban design and an improved site plan. And the height waivers would range from 5 feet plus bulkhead on block B to 70 feet waiver plus bulkhead on block C. Next slide, please. In terms of setbacks, the applicants seek waivers in certain locations around the 5 blocks, ranging from 5 to 15 feet. The waivers correspond to additional at-grade building setbacks to create articulated facades without setbacks and ensure ample pedestrian circulation space and light and air to the streets. For example, the buildings facing Playground 35 and the open space on Block C are proposed with sheer street walls fronting on Steinway Street. On 41st Street in the mid-block and southern locations, a setback waiver is proposed on the west side of the street to accommodate a shallow interior lot condition, offset by corresponding at-grade setbacks on the east side of the street, ensuring again ample light and air and additional pedestrian space on this narrow street. Next slide, please. The proposed development seeks waivers for mid-block rear yards and rear yards equivalent on portions of buildings on blocks C, D, and E. For residential uses in developments utilizing quality housing regulations in the zoning districts in which the proposed development would be located, a 60-foot rear yard equivalent located midway between two opposite streets of the block would be required. In addition, for commercial and community facility uses, a 40-foot rear yard equivalent located midway between two opposite streets is required. Certain buildings on each block will be partially located within these rear yard equivalents. However, according to the applicant, the buildings will be located in areas that allow for residential uses to receive ample light and air from adjacent setbacks, streets, and the new public open spaces. The waiver of the rear yard equivalent of Block D would also allow for the multiplex cinema to be constructed evenly across the block, which would provide for improved layouts of each theater. Next slide, please. The applicants propose to modify signage regulations for the cinema on Block D. The commission may permit such modifications, again provided that such modifications would result in a better site plan. Next slide, please. There are two locations proposed for modification, the first of which would be on 41st Street. This street would be fronting on the east side of 41st Street at the facade of the cinema, as seen here in the key plan. And the applicants propose a 400 square foot wall sign located within an area as shown in hatching in this diagram. The second modification would be on 35th Avenue, where the applicants propose a wall sign, as we'll see in the next diagram, as well as a 100 square foot blade sign, which can be seen in this elevation. Next slide, please. The 35th Avenue frontage wall sign would be a non-illuminated sign with a maximum of 150 square feet, located within the hatched area in this diagram. Next slide, please. The applicants seek also to distribute parking spaces across the development site, and the commission may permit such a distribution. Next slide, please. Provided that, again, the distribution would result primarily in a better site plan and that it would not draw excessive traffic through or to local streets. Next slide, please. As this diagram shows, all blocks would provide parking in the cellar level, with entrances shown by the arrows here. The applicants propose to distribute 16 spaces from Block E to Block A, which due to the block configuration is larger and can accommodate more spaces. Next slide, please. The applicants also propose to reduce the loading berth requirements on several of the blocks, and the commission may permit such reduction of berths pursuant to the text amendment proposed in this application to make such loading berth reductions also applicable to the special MX district in CD1, provided that, next slide, please, deliveries and any resulting traffic would not interfere with the functioning of streets, and that, as before, the reduction would provide for a superior site plan with respect to surrounding streets. Next slide, please. The applicants propose loading berth reductions in 4 of the 5 blocks, with proposed entries as shown with arrows on this diagram. There would be 5 berths required on A, whereas the applicants propose 2. 2 on Block B, whereas they propose 1. 4 on Block C, whereas they propose, again, 1. 6 would be required primarily due to the cinema on Block D, whereas they propose 1. And on Block E, there would be 2 required and 2 are proposed, therefore they do not seek a waiver on Block E. Next slide, please. Finally, the applicants seek flexibility in citing certain large retail establishments, which would otherwise be restricted by floor area across the development site. The commission may permit such stores with no limitations on floor area, provided that, next slide, please. Similar to prior findings, the uses proposed would not impair the essential character of the surrounding area, and that such uses would not unduly affect traffic or congestion on local streets. Next slide, please. In seeking relief, the applicants propose this flexibility across the majority of the development site, with waivers applying to those locations shown here in pink. Next slide, please. A notice of completion and a draft environmental impact statement was issued on the 22nd. Of these, the analysis found that the potential for significant adverse impacts would be in the following categories: community facilities for libraries and public childcare facilities, open space for specifically an active open space, shadows, transportation for traffic, transit, and pedestrian, air quality, and construction for the categories of transportation and noise. No other significant adverse impacts were identified, and mitigation measures are identified in the draft environmental impact statement and will be further studied between the draft and final EIS. Next slide, please. In summary, the applicants propose a series of actions, including zoning map amendments, zoning text amendments, special permits related to bulk signage, parking, and loading regulations, and for large retail establishments, to facilitate a proposed development totaling approximately 2.7 million square feet, inclusive of more than 2,800 residential units, of which more than 700 would be affordable, nearly 200,000 square feet of commercial space, more than 230,000 square feet of office space, 100,000 square feet of community facility space, and again, more than 2 acres of public open space. Thank you so much, and I'm happy to take questions at this point.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We appreciate the thoroughness of your presentation and all of the work that you and your team have put into getting us to this date. Now, I will note we are at the certification phase, so really the threshold question here is, from the department, is this ready to be certified? We're here, so the answer to that question presumably is yes, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I think it's important for us to pose that question to you.
Yes, thank you so much. The answer is yes.
Okay, good. Now let's talk about, since we're not going to be able to resist to get into some of the meatier details of this, even though the project is at its very, very beginning stage. Let me just pose a few questions, and I'm going to step back and go to the commission because I know that they're going to have lots of questions too. The open space, it seems deliberately placed in a way to try to be spread out across all of the blocks in this large scale development. I do wonder, though, whether there's a way to connect all of the open space together and perhaps even to allow for some access on 37th Street on the west side of this site. Is that something that could be possible here? Is that something that you explored with the development team in the early days?
We explored multiple layout options for the building massing and open space, and this is ultimately what the applicants have proposed. But pursuant to any application modifications proposed, that connection could be made through to the 37th Street connection, as you stated. Although I will note just once more that the access in that diagram across blocks A through E would be visually accessible, but there are no proposed crosswalks in those mid-block locations.
Okay, got it. But there is no physical access from 37th Street now. Is that right?
There is no physical
to the
access.
open space.
Well, there's active open space, and maybe it would help actually to bring up the diagram again.
Great.
That is slide 33. Yes, that's the one. So there is open space access from 37th Street. That's shown in location number 3 here. That would be a public open space, but it's on the southern portion of the block, which I think is probably referring to an extension of number 1 to the west side of 37th Street.
That is correct. That is exactly the one that I was referring to, because I can see that there's an effort here to create some visual connectivity between 1, 4, 6, 7, and 8. But it also seems that you have to kind of go looking for it within the site to some degree in order to find it. So I note that opportunity at 37th Street as an opportunity here to perhaps open that up. Okay, so for further discussion, thank you, Stephen. And then on the draft environmental impact statement, it noted impacts on community facilities, but I noted that included libraries and other, but it did not note impact on schools. Did the draft environmental impact statement find there was no no impact on schools?
It did. That's exactly right. It found that there was no impact on schools, and as such, there would not be any adverse impacts in that category. And we have had that discussion with the applicant team and the SCA.
Okay, great. Couple more questions for me. I know that part of the two of the special permits or more relate to granting of setback waivers and the rear yard waivers here. It also just, looking at this first draft of the proposal, I understood as you were presenting for the purpose of today, the articulation by the development team as to why the setback waivers are good or appropriate or necessary here. But it does appear to me that at least there should be some debate as to whether those setback waivers are good and appropriate here, including the rear yard waiver. So I just flag that for further discussion, because it's while this is a really big and impressive opportunity and one that we want to take really seriously, it does look like those particular waivers may allow for a little bit more density on the site than perhaps it should have, but that we'll explore during the course of this process. Is that a fair observation, Stephen?
I think it is. I think it certainly is. And it's certainly something we will look forward to exploring during public review.
Okay. Alexis, I see you popped up. Do you have anything to add there?
No, Stephen is answering everything quite effectively. I'm just here as backup as the questions continue.
Okay, great. I'm now going to stop and go to the commission and see who has some questions here. We'll give them a chance. Commissioner Burney.
Thank you. And thank you, Stephen. That was quite a marathon presentation you had to undergo there. So well done. I must say, I think that these really large developments present a real opportunity to think holistically about creating neighborhoods that we don't often have an opportunity to do when we're doing little individual lots and so on. So I think it's really interesting. And I noticed that there is a lot of discussion about that idea of neighborhood building in terms of access to daycare and retail and health facilities and so on. But I note in your presentation, the use of that term provide access to, and I'm wondering, what does that really mean? What guarantee do we have that there will be daycare and there will be health facilities and there will be community centers and so on? How does that process actually play out? And to what extent are we able to make that a commitment?
It's my understanding that none of the actions requested by this applicant team would allow for the ability for the commission to require them. They would be as of right uses within the zoning districts proposed, but the applicant team could certainly make commitments outside of the actions during the course of public review.
And is that a typical, I know it's not a community benefit agreement, but is that a typical undertaking that we see?
In my experience, applicants have committed to providing certain uses that have been requested during the course of public review. I believe it is typical, but I will defer to Alexis if we have any more to add on that.
Okay.
Only to say that it is certainly something that we're seeing happen more and more often in our projects. If you think to some of our recent projects that have been through ULURP in the Northwest Ravenswood geography, for example, such as the recently reviewed 11th and 34th Street application, because we are looking at projects that are focused on a larger intensity of mixed use, there does tend to be these earlier conversations around potential partnerships and tenancies. And then also just, the Queen's office and DCP ourselves, we do really carry a high priority with opportunities for workforce development and economic development, as well as any opportunity to meet outstanding community needs. And so we certainly do try to guide that collaboration process as much as possible, but at the end of the day, ultimately, it is not something that is baked into our regulatory approvals.
Okay. Another question, Stephen, I noticed in one of your slides, you mentioned that 21 lots are not controlled by the developer. So what is the impact of that on this project?
Sure. And if we could go back to slide 37. I think this diagram shows it most clearly. So again, the proposed rezoning and proposed text amendments would apply to the entirety of this 5-block area, but only those sites that the applicant team controls would be subject to the proposed special permits. And those sites would comprise the area shown in this diagram in the salmon color, the area that would be subject to this large-scale general development. So there are sites outside of the development site that would be proposed, again, for this rezoning and text amendment, that would be considered projected development sites. There would be one of those locations on Block B, 2 locations on Block C, 2 locations on D, and 1 location on E, such that the total proposed effects of the rezoning would be more than the proposed 2,800 units just on this development site. But again, that is not the subject of this proposal, and the applicant team wouldn't be able to control that.
I see. So all of the space that you talked about, the 2.7 million square feet, the 200,000 square feet, that's all on those blocks that are controlled by the development team, not on the excluded lots.
That's correct. And that's the general format of presentations, because that is what the applicant is here to propose.
Okay.
But it does happen sometimes that there are areas outside of those properties that they would control that would be subject to the actions that could result in additional proposed housing or other uses. And that is the case here.
But in your axonometric massing diagram, you're showing development on those lots that are not controlled by the applicant, right?
Let's go back to slide. Actually, let's go to slide 35. And the answer to that, Commissioner, is no. This diagram only shows the portion of the development site that is actually proposed.
Okay, good. I get it now. I understand now. Okay. And then just one final question, just following up on what Chair Grodnick said. It's a bit surprising that there's no impact on schools. And also, I haven't really had a close look at the DES, but one would imagine there's a pretty significant impact on transit, given all of the additional people that are being put on these sites. And I expect the DIS will address that issue also.
It certainly will. Again, with respect to schools, the team conducted the analysis and we have discussed this with the SCA. There has been significant school development, thanks to the hard work of Alexis and the Western Queens team here. So I'll defer to her if she wants to add a bit more to that. But just because you raised it on the subject of transit, there would be an impact assumed for, I believe it's the southbound AM peak transit on the N and W line, located again about 6 blocks to the west of the development site. And that addressing that impact would take, I believe, an additional 2 trains in that AM peak time per hour. I would also note that the DEIS states that without the communications-based train control, that additional 2 trains per hour would not be possible. And that the funding of that CBTC is not present at this time.
Okay. And then just one last quick thing. On the space number 7, I notice it's not really an open space in the sense that it's open to the sky. There's a building sitting on top of it. And I just wonder how you all feel about the quality of that space in the dark under the cinema. I don't know how you feel about that, but it seems to me it's not of the quality of the other spaces that they're providing and calling public open space.
It's certainly a different makeup, Commissioner, you're absolutely right. And if we go back to slide 33, I think this shows it in a little more detail. As the applicants have proposed it, it would front on the ground floor commercial uses immediately on the north side of that space number 7 and the south side, primarily which would be the cinema as well as other small retail establishments. And because it's not open ground to sky, it certainly has a different feel. But the applicants have maintained that it would be fully available and open to the public with access both from 41st Street and 42nd Street. And all of the open spaces here that would be public open spaces would also be governed by a site plan with respect to the large scale general development special permits and restrictive declaration.
Okay, good. Those are my questions. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Let me go to Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Thank you, Chair. That was a very, very good presentation, Mr. Everett. Congratulations.
Thank you.
This is a massive undertaking. I would assume we're looking at a build out of what, a decade here, if this indeed goes forward.
That's exactly right. The proposed timeframe for build out would begin in 2022, after such time that the actions may be approved at the City Council. So that'd be 2022, and that 10-year build out would lead to a 2032 full build out.
And certainly with 2 of the 3 developers named here with whom I'm familiar, there is a substantial track record. But if for any reason there was, a sell-off of any one of the parcels, this plan, if approved, would have to be adhered to. I mean, there could not be a departure from this, could it?
Not without modification. So the large-scale general development imposes a site plan and series of conditions, specifically to site plan and locations where height, setback, and rear yard equivalents are requested for modification pursuant to something other than what the underlying zoning districts would allow. And any development by any party would be subject to the regulations of those approved site plans, absent a modification.
Mm-hmm. And I, just in reference to the lack of impact on schools, is that based on the undercapacity of the schools as we speak, or what is that data? What is that analysis based on in terms of the current state of the school population there?
Sure, I think it's actually primarily related to school development in recent years. And we'll certainly bring more information back to you at the time of the hearing with respect to the specific number that may be due to current conditions, specifically after COVID. Alexis, do you have any more you want to add to that? Commissioner, we'll certainly bring more information back to you at the time of the hearing.
Yes, at the hearing, we can certainly confirm the enrollment numbers that were being used as part of the DES. And then, yes, as Stephen has already referenced, over the past several years, there has been sort of a concerted effort around trying to rebalance the substantial growth that Western Queens experienced, especially when looking at the amount of residential growth that happened around Long Island City. And there was a pretty extreme shortage of school seats at the time. And so there has been concerted multi-agency attention given to try to deliver additional school streets to this, or seats to this district. And so that's actually one of the things that has really informed the fact that there is not a need triggered in this analysis right now, because there again has been a number of new schools delivered. Not to say that that isn't something that we still need to be looking at in a larger geography, but in terms of this specific district, we are in fact in a good place at the moment. And I do also just want to say that, there are a number of categories that actually we were a bit surprised that development of this scale that more significant adverse impacts weren't triggered, just considering the size of this. Sewers, for example, which is typically a big one to be triggered in large scale development. That's actually not an issue in the environmental analysis here. And considering the number of transit lines that this site is accessible to, the fact that the impact is actually on the slightly more remote lines and not the more immediate lines. All of these things together kind of say to us that this is certainly an area that can accommodate additional density. And so we do look forward to continuing to discuss what sort of scale and appropriateness we're going to be looking at here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi, thank you, Chair. So I wanted to ask a few questions about displacement. The DEIS likely didn't go into that in depth. And I'm curious about, the buildings that you mentioned, the low-rise residential buildings on 36th Avenue in particular. You'd mentioned that it's unlikely they'll be affected. Where does that sort of perspective come from? My understanding is that you're going to an R9 at that location. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is what is proposed there.
So those are relative, they can't be more than 30 feet high. And the max building height in an R9 is 225 feet. So, I imagine there would be a lot of pressure on those properties, and that may be fine. We may want density, but, I guess I would be interested in what the community board says about that and their feedback and whether they have concerns about displacement at that location.
Certainly, Commissioner.
And then the second thing to flag is that this new development is not in the business improvement district, yet is planning to add, significant new residential development and commercial activity. And so I wondered if, through this exercise, we could discuss the impact on the bid and whether it's appropriate to perhaps flag an opportunity for bid expansion to ensure that the balance of Steinway, which now it doesn't make sense. It's not retail at this location, but in the proposed development, there will be retail. And so an expansion might be necessary to ensure that we have a continual steward from one end of Steinway to the other. So I would also like to flag that for both the developer and the community board.
Thank you very much. We look forward to continuing these conversations as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Ortiz. Let me see if there are other commissioners here seeking to ask any questions of our incredible Queens team. Seeing none, we thank you both, Stephen, Alexis. We thank you for all the work that you have put into this to date. We know there's more to come, but we know that it has been a significant amount of work. We thank you for that. With that, this Innovation Queens rezoning and LSGD is certified. We're going to move on to the next item. Edwin, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Garodnick. The second item on our agenda is a certification of a zoning map amendment in Queens Community District 5. Our presenter is Luis Garcia Martinez.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is a private application by Robert Thomas for a zoning map amendment from an R5 zoning district to an R5 DC23 district to facilitate the enlargement of an existing one-story building currently used as an animal clinic. Next slide. This is with 2 additional stories, including a total of 2 dwelling units and 2,400 square feet of residential use at 7846 Metropolitan Avenue in Middle Village, Queens, Community District 5. Next slide. The project area is located in the southern portion of the neighborhood of Middle Village, north of Glendale, Beechwood, and the Queens Cemetery Belt. southwest of Rico Park, and southeast of Maspeth. Next slide. For reference, this is a view to the northwest of this area of Middle Village. The surrounding area generally consists of a mix of 1, 2, and multifamily residential uses, as well as mixed use and commercial uses. The prevalent build form along Metropolitan Avenue consists of 1 to 4 story mixed use buildings with commercial uses on the ground floor and residential uses above. The areas to the north and south of the project area are characterized by 2 to 3 story, 1, 2, and multifamily walk-up residential buildings. Nearby public facilities and institutions include Public School 87, located southeast of the project area, PS 049, located north of the project area, and PSIS 128Q, located west of the project area. There are several large open spaces located in the proximity. These include the 190-acre St. John's Cemetery located 1 block east, the 225-acre All Faiths Cemetery located 3 blocks to the west, and the 55-acre Juniper Valley Park located approximately half a mile to the north of the project area. The area is served by local subway and bus services. The Metropolitan Avenue subway station, which serves the M train, is located about 3/4 of a mile west of the project area. The Q54 bus with service to Jamaica and Williamsburg runs along Metropolitan Avenue with a stop located directly in front of the project area. 1 block east, the 80th Street Metropolitan Avenue bus stop serves the Q54, 47, and 29 bus lines with service to Atlas Mall, LaGuardia Marine Air Terminal, Jackson Heights, and Glendale. Next slide. The project area is located at the southern edge of an R5 district that extends along Metropolitan Avenue between 80th Street to the east and All Faiths Cemetery to the west. R5 districts are low-density, non-contextual residential zoning districts that allow a maximum FAR of 1.25 for residential uses. Metropolitan Avenue is a 100-foot wide commercial corridor, which includes a range of local retail and service uses, including medical and professional offices, beauty salons, and food and beverage establishments. Commercial overlays, which are zoning designations that allow local commercial uses on the ground floor of a building, are mapped along Metropolitan Avenue, east and west of the project area, except for the block where the project area is located. The surrounding area is mapped to the north and south, mostly with R4A and R41 contextual districts that permit 1 and 2 family detached and semi-detached residences. Next slide. The project area consists of Block 3776, Lot 30 and 31, and includes the applicant-owned development site, currently improved with a 2,500 square foot, 1-story building used as an animal clinic in Lot 31, outlined in red here, and 1 non-applicant-owned site in Lot 30. The project area is bounded by Metropolitan Avenue to the north, 79th Street to the east, a line 50 feet west of 79th Street to the west, and the middle block line at 100 feet of depth to the south. Lot 30, which is the non-applicant owned lot, is a 2,600 square foot lot and is improved with a 3-story mixed-use building with ground floor commercial use and 4 dwelling units above. The proposed development site consists of Lot 31 and has an area of approximately 2,600 square feet with 25 feet of frontage along Metropolitan Avenue and 106 feet of frontage along 79th Street. Next slide. Here we can see a photo of the project area to the southwest with the development site outlined in red from the intersection of Metropolitan Avenue and 79th Street, including the 3-story mixed-use building on Lot 30 behind the development site and the animal clinic on the development site. Next slide. Here we can see a view of the project area and development site as viewed from 79th Street to the northwest with the development site outlined in red as well. Next slide. The proposed development consists of the enlargement of the existing one-story building with 2 additional stories and a total of 2 dwelling units. The proposed development will have a total floor area of about 4,900 square feet at 1.94 FAR, including the existing 2,500 square feet of commercial ground floor use, and the new approximately 2,400 square feet of residential use distributed in 2 floors above. Next slide. The proposed development will rise to a total height of 33 feet of a 40-foot maximum permitted, and the second and third story will set back from Metropolitan Avenue street line by approximately 40 feet and approximately 55 feet along the interior lot line. The proposed C23 commercial overlay will bring the existing non-conforming commercial establishments located within the proposed project area into conformance. Next slide. To facilitate the proposed development, the applicant proposes a zoning map amendment to change the existing R5 zoning district to an R5D-C23 zoning district in the project area. The R5D zoning district is a contextual residential district designed to encourage residential growth along major corridors such as Metropolitan Avenue, and permits a maximum FAR of 2.0 for residential or community facility uses. This increase in allowable residential FAR between the existing R5 zoning district at 1.25 and the proposed R5D zoning district at 2.0 is appropriate at this intersection along Metropolitan Avenue and is consistent with the existing build form located within the surrounding area. The proposed C23 commercial overlay is appropriate as a similar commercial overlay is mapped on the block directly east of the project area. And this is the only block along this section of Metropolitan Avenue without a commercial overlay. In addition, as mentioned before, this section of Metropolitan Avenue is characterized by commercial uses, including medical and professional offices, beauty salons, convenience stores, and eating and drinking establishments. Next slide. In summary, this is a private application by Robert Thomas for a zoning map amendment to change an existing R5 zoning district to an R5D-C23 zoning district to facilitate the enlargement of an existing one-story building with 2 additional stories and a total of 2 dwelling units at 7846 Metropolitan Avenue in Middle Village, Queens, Community District 5. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Luis. Certainly, at a minimum here, the juxtaposition of Innovation Queens with 7846 Metropolitan Avenue shows the versatility of the Queens office. We appreciate it very much. Let me just ask one quick question, and it relates to the height of the building as proposed next to the 3-story mixed-use building next door. And I think I can see what the answer is, but you said that the proposed height of the new building would be 33 feet. I see that right next door you have those 3-story mixed-use buildings. Are they also 33 feet, or where are they next door, just to orient us?
Yes, next door is about 33 to 35 feet as well.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you very much. Let me see if there are questions here. Commissioner Levin.
Yes, actually, I have a couple of questions in the same vein. That is that the street view image we saw of the development site and the adjacent building suggests there are lot line windows in the adjacent building. And I'm wondering about the status of those windows. Will they be blocked up? Are they legal windows at the moment? And secondly, why the 2 new stories are pushed back from, are proposed to be pushed back from Metropolitan Avenue and not lined up on the street line?
I would have to check back the height of the windows on the building on lot 30. We are not sure what height that is, but I can get back to you on that. The proposed development, it has a setback to compile with the proposed FAR as well. So instead of having it towards Metropolitan Avenue, they're having the 2 units, the 2 levels setback. Is that your question?
Yes.
That was the
why it's not pushed further forward to Metropolitan Avenue, so you get a street frontage that's, consistent.
That was part of the proposal, of the design proposal, but I can definitely reach out to the applicant team to clarify that. We noticed that for them to have access to the upper levels, they have to have the access back there, because the veterinary office has all the frontage of the corner lot, let's say. So the access to the residential buildings are on 79th Street at the back of the lot.
Okay, so that probably is the explanation. But yeah, if they could confirm that in the public hearing, that would be great.
Of course.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Excellent. Thank you very much for the presentation. With that, 7846 Metropolitan Avenue is now certified. Let's move on to a new borough. Edwin.
Yes, indeed. Our third item this afternoon, Commissioners, on our agenda is a certification of a UDAP designation and disposition of city-owned property and an amendment to an urban renewal plan in Brooklyn and Community District 5. Our presenter is Karina Leung.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So this project is located in the southeastern part of East New York, Community District 5, Brooklyn. HB is requesting a UDAP designation, next slide, please. HPD is requesting a UDAP designation, project approval and disposition for site 26A in the Fresh Creek Urban Renewal Area, as well as changes to the urban renewal plan for this area to facilitate a new 8-story building with about 200 units for seniors that would be 100% affordable. The building will be an heirs development and have additional community facility space to be tenanted out. HB is also requesting technical changes to the Fresh Creek URP, which would support the 5th and final phase of the 2,500 affordable residential units that were already planned for and previously approved for within the Fresh Creek URP. Next slide. The Fresh Creek URA is roughly bounded by Flatlands Avenue to the north, Fountain Avenue to the west, the Belt Parkway to the south, and Hendricks Creek to the west. The development sites are located in the northern portion, which is mostly residential, but includes a school, a neighborhood retail, and services along Elton Street. The residential area is divided into quadrants by Elton Street and Vandalia Avenue, with each quadrant to have an open space operated by the Parks Department. The senior housing project site, site 26A, is at the far east end of the southeastern quadrant, and the other project, phase 5, is in the northwest quadrant. In the eastern part of the URA, between Erskine Street and Fountain Avenue, Empire State Development controls the site that's being redeveloped as a mixed-use campus that will have over 4,000 units when complete. On all of these will be affordable. A large shopping center known as Gateway Center Mall comprises the southern portion of the URA. And then beyond this, to the south, there are bike and walking paths within the URA and Shirley Chisholm Park. The area to the west-north is primarily residential with neighborhood retail and services, and then an industrial area that's part of the Flatlands and Fairfield IBZ, or industrial business zone, to the north, and more residential and high-intensity uses are located to the east, which include things like a bus depot and like salt materials and storage. Next slide. Development Site 1, which is Site 26A in the URP, and much of the surrounding area is zoned R6, which is a medium density zoning district that allows for developments up to 8 stories high and with 3.9 residential FAR when there are heirs units in the project. Parking is required for 10% of heirs units and 25% of other units. The site additionally has a C24 overlay, which allows for commercial use on the ground floor. The Fresh Creek URP has a blanket height limit of 4 stories, with some exceptions at certain locations for buildings to be up to 8 stories. Next slide. The site is a vacant lot that's about 35,000 square feet. It comprises the eastern half of the block bounded by Vandalia on the north, Erskine Street on the east, Schrader's Avenue on the south, and Berryman Street on the west. It's currently designated for public and semi-public uses in the URP, which the plan defines as community facility and commercial uses in use groups 3, 4, and 6, which include things like community centers, schools, clinics, etc. The western half of the block is the designated open space for this quadrant, and Parks Department recently completed Berryman Playground there. Vandalia Avenue and Erskine Street are both wide streets serving as main thoroughways through the URA. And as you can see here, Erskine is especially wide at the intersection with Vandalia. Traders Avenue also runs across the URA west of Erskine, but becomes a pedestrian throughway known as Schrader's Walk to the east. The surrounding 1 and 2 family homes all have off-street parking accessed from the rear, which you can see in the lower left part of the image. Nearby buses run along Erskine and Vandalia, and these routes go from the urban renewal area to the New Lots Avenue 3 train stop, to Bushwick, and to Jamaica Queens. Next slide. So in this image, we're looking at the southeast corner of Site 26A. You can see that Erskine Street is running from the bottom left towards the right, and you can see here how broad it is and how open the area feels. Next slide. So in this photo, we're looking east along Schrader's Avenue with Berryman Playground in the foreground. And beyond the development site, you can see one of the 9-story buildings that's part of the ESD development. Next slide. Okay, so we're now looking at the site plan, which is turned about 90 degrees clockwise from previous views. You can see that the building is generally located at the lot line, allowing for a resident courtyard that has a view of Berryman Playground. At its highest, the building is 8 stories, but there's many portions of the building step down to 6 and 4 stories. And in total, the building would be 130,000 square feet, or 3.76 FAR. Next slide. On the ground floor, entries and public spaces are located along Erskine and Vandalia. There are a handful of residential units on the ground floor, which are elevated a couple feet for privacy. No accessory vehicle parking is provided. A zoning override was requested and approved to waive all of the 27 required spaces due to the fact that the below grade construction would be prohibitively costly due to technical requirements relating to the site's former use as a landfill, and providing these spaces at the ground level alternatively would result in the loss of units and community spaces that wouldn't be desirable for this plan. Next slide. Here we're looking at what's proposed illustrative rendering of the proposed development, looking at the southeast corner where the main residential entrance is located. Next slide. So this is a view from above Berryman Playground. You can see the residential courtyard at the center of the image. Next slide. And then this is an illustrative view of the north side along Vandalia Avenue, and you can see how the building steps down towards the lower scale residential buildings, which would be to the right in this image. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we're going to move on to the second development site, which encompasses phase 5 of the Fresh Creek URP, and that's located in the northwest quadrant. Next slide. Okay, so phase 5 is comprised of sites on blocks that are bounded roughly by Flatlands Avenue to the north, Elton Street, Vandalia Avenue, and then Gateway Drive. So I want to note that along Elton Street and Vandalia Avenue, you can see large apartment style buildings, and then along Elton Street and Flatlands Avenue are the apartment buildings, and then along Vandalia Avenue and Ashford Street are kind of smaller sized 4-story buildings that each have about 8 units each. These buildings with the white tops on Vandalia and Ashford are called an octet style. Next slide. Okay, so this is a portion of the existing land use plan for the Fresh Creek URA, showing the URP site numbers and designated land uses. Next slide. So in the proposed land use plan, HPD is proposing to merge the sites on each of the 2 blocks west of Ashford Street and north of Egan Street to form sites sites 3A, B and 3EF. They're merging these sites in order to build out phase 5 with the larger apartment style buildings like you saw on Elm Street, which are more efficient to construct than the small scale octet style buildings that were previously planned for the site. Next slide. The proposed massing for phase 5 is shown below, or shown here. There would be 9 buildings of either 40 or 80 units, and the buildings would range from about 40,000 to about 180,000 square feet, all between about 1.5 to 2 FAR. The total number of units in phase 5 of 560 would remain unchanged from what was previously planned with the octet style buildings, and the buildings would still remain limited to 4 stories high. Next slide. So in summary, there's 2 asks here from HPD. The first is to facilitate the development for site 26A, which would include nearly 200 affordable units for seniors. HPD requests a UDAP designation, project approval and disposition, as well as several changes to the URP that would allow this project to be built. Additionally, HPD is also requesting several technical changes to the URP to facilitate changes, or to facilitate the change in building typology for phase 5. That concludes my presentation. I'll now take any questions that you have.
Thank you very much. Before I go to the commission, I just have one. These 2 sites, 26A and phase 5, they're both sites within an existing urban renewal plan, correct?
Yeah.
And they're both entirely vacant right now?
Yes. Yeah.
So what is the history of these sites? Were they ever intended to be developed? Have they just been sitting there for this whole time?
Yeah, so I mean, there was a master plan developed back in the 90s and then revised again for the entire URA area. The phase 5 was always planned to be residential. And then the site 26A, it was initially residential, and then at one point they mapped a C24 overlay and changed it to semi-public and public, because there was a thought there might be a childcare center there, but you know, that ended up being no longer needed, and they have decided to it would be better to put senior housing here.
And when was this urban renewal plan established?
I believe it was in the 60s or 70s. I don't have the date offhand.
Okay.
Yeah.
But nothing. So okay. So it's just been. It's just nothing has actually happened, and it has been sitting there.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Let me see if there's questions from the panel here. Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for that. That item, Gateway Site 26A and Phase 5 are now certified. We're going to stick to Brooklyn for the moment. Edwin, what's cooking next?
What's next? Our 4th item on our agenda is a certification of a zoning map and zoning text amendment and special permit in Brooklyn Community District 5. Our presenter is Jonah Rogoff.
Good afternoon, commissioners.
Oh.
Next slide, please. Great. So this is an application by the Angelina Gatto Trust for a zoning map amendment from M21 to an M14 R78 district, a zoning text amendment to map a mandatory inclusionary housing area and designate an MX or mixed use district, as well as a city planning commission special permit to waive off-street accessory parking to facilitate a 9-story mixed-use building with 48 units, 13 of which would be permanently affordable, and ground floor commercial space in the Gowanus neighborhood of Brooklyn within Community District 6. Next slide, please. So just to walk through the surrounding area, we note that it contains a mix of industrial, commercial, residential uses. The area east of the Gowanus Canal and west of 3rd Avenue consists primarily of 1 to 2-story warehouse-style buildings with commercial, light manufacturing, construction, and other types of storage and warehouse based uses. Most of these industrial uses are concentrated in the Southwest Brooklyn Industrial Business Zone, or IBZ, located just to the west and south of the project area. And then between 2nd and 3rd Avenues are clusters of 2 to 4 story row house style homes and walk-up apartments, while the area further east of 3rd Avenue is predominantly residential, with 3rd and 4th Avenues also serving as local commercial thoroughfares. I'd also note that large portions of Gowanus further to the north, shaded in a black shade, were recently rezoned as part of the Gowanus neighborhood plan. And those are just a few blocks outside of the project area. The surrounding area is well served by public transit. The F, G, and R lines can be accessed less than a quarter mile from the project area at the 4th Avenue and 9th Street subway station, with further access to the F and G lines at the Smith Street station, both of which are connected by 9th Street, a 60-foot wide east-west corridor that crosses the canal and also connects the neighborhoods of Carroll Gardens and Park Slope. Additionally, there are several bus lines that run on 9th Street and 3rd and 4th Avenues, providing access to downtown Brooklyn and other neighborhoods in central and southern Brooklyn. Next slide. And as shown in the map above, the 9th Street corridor between 2nd and 3rd Avenues contain a mix of pre-existing non-conforming residential use with industrial concentrated to the south and west of the project area. The area west of 3rd Avenue extending to the Gowanus Canal is zoned M21, a manufacturing district that permits industrial and commercial use up to 2 FAR. M21 allows base heights up to 60 feet with additional building height governed by the sky exposure plane. Accessory off-street parking is generally required at a proportion of 1 space for every 300 square feet of commercial and 1 space for every 1,000 square feet of industrial. Much of the east side of 3rd Avenue is mapped with an R6A C24 district, while the mid-blocks between 3rd and 4th Avenues are zoned R6B, both of which were mapped as part of the department-sponsored Park Slope rezoning in 2003, primarily to maintain the neighborhood character. Approximately 3 blocks to the south, just outside the map extent area, would bring to the Commission's attention. There were 2 block frontages between 11th and 13th Streets along 3rd Avenue that were recently rezoned from M21 to C44A, a commercial district with an R7A equivalent as part of the 506 3rd Avenue rezoning approved just in December of 2021. Next slide, please. And just to illustrate the project area and its immediate context, this slide shows a bird's eye view facing north, the project area in a dotted blue line, the development site outlined in yellow, and the IBZ boundary outlined in purple, and then individual tax lots in the rezoning area labeled in white. You can also view the elevated subway viaduct where the F and G lines run just to the south. The project area encompasses a mid-block frontage on the north side of 9th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenues, covering 16 full and partial tax lots, beginning at a distance 175 feet from 2nd Avenue, just east of the IBZ boundary, and then extending to a distance 100 feet west of 3rd Avenue, bounded by 9th Street to the south, and a center line between 8th and 9th Streets to the north. The development site is an approximately 8,200 square foot lot, consisting of lots 48, 49, and 50, which are used for surface parking and outdoor storage. In addition, the project area is mainly characterized by 2 to 4 story walk-up apartment buildings on 8 of the project area's lots. And then on 2 lots, there are 1 and 2 family homes, all of which are pre-existing non-conforming uses. And lastly, on lot 43 is a 1-story industrial warehouse building. Next slide. So above is a view of the development site, which, as I mentioned, is mainly used for outdoor vehicle storage and covers about 82 feet of frontage along 9th Street. Next slide. And then here's a view of 9th Street looking west towards 2nd Avenue, with the development site on the right and the additional lots occupied by residential buildings in the project area shown in the dotted blue line. Next slide. Now, here's a view turning in the opposite direction along 9th Street, looking east towards 3rd Avenue, with the project area on the left, where you can see the warehouse use on lot 43 and the remaining residential buildings. I'd also point out the active industrial uses to the right, which are located in the IBZ to the south of the project area. Next slide. And moving further east, here's a view of the 3rd Avenue corridor looking south from 9th Street, where you can see the corridor's mixed-use character and the subway viaduct 1 block to the south. Next slide. And lastly, a view of 9th Street facing east at 3rd Avenue, where the corridor widens and you can see the newly constructed buildings by the corner of 4th Avenue, 1 block to the east. Next slide. So the applicant proposes to construct a 9-story mixed-use building with 48 dwelling units, of which 13 would be permanently affordable, and an 8,000 square foot ground level commercial space, totaling 41,213 square feet of floor area. The proposed development would have a base height of 75 feet, followed by a 15-foot setback, the dormer, before rising to a building height of 95 feet. No off-street residential or commercial parking is being provided as part of the proposed development. Next slide. And here's a second rendering showing the ground floor condition. The applicant is considering a few options for the ground floor space, but has expressed interest in a supermarket. Next slide. To facilitate the proposal, the applicant is requesting 3 land use actions. First, a zoning map amendment from M21 to M14 R7A. Second, a zoning text amendment to map MIH and establish an MX district. And third, a special permit to waive off-street accessory parking. Next slide. So as part of the first action, the applicant seeks to rezone a portion of the northern mid-block frontage of 9th Street from M21 to an M14 R7A district, which, as I mentioned earlier, would extend 175 feet east of 2nd Avenue and 100 feet west of 3rd Avenue. Next slide. M14 R7A is a mixed use or MX district that pairs an M14 district with an R7A district. M14 R7A allows up to 2 FAR for commercial and industrial use, 4 FAR for community facility use, and 4.6 FAR for residential use within inclusionary housing areas. M14 R7A allows base heights between 40 and 85 feet with a qualifying ground floor, after which buildings must set back either 10 feet on a wide street or 15 feet on a narrow street. Building heights may then rise to a maximum of 95 feet with a qualifying ground floor. Parking is generally required for 50% of the units and optional for income restricted units in the transit zone, while no parking is required for commercial or industrial use. MX districts are also subject to special regulations that allow a wide variety of uses, as Stephen noted in the earlier presentation, including light industrial and residential to be developed as of right and located either side by side or within the same building. Next slide. Second, the applicant requests zoning text amendments to create an MIH area under option 1 and establish an MX district. Option 1 requires that 25% of the residential floor area be affordable for residents with incomes averaging 60% of the area median income or below, with a minimum of 10% of the floor area be affordable at 40% AMI. Moreover, another text amendment is being sought just to establish a mixed-use district tentatively designated as MX25. The third and final action requested is a City Planning Commission special permit pursuant to section 74-533 in order to waive the 18 required accessory off-street parking spaces for the residential use. According to the applicant, the special permit would eliminate the need for off-street parking in an area very close to public transit and remove the need for a curb cut along an active corridor used by trucks, buses, pedestrians, and bicyclists, while also resulting in a more efficiently designed building that can better accommodate the proposed mix of uses. Next slide. As a quick follow-up to, or I should say for a little more context. So follow up to the Gowanus framework released in 2018, the department, in collaboration with agency partners, local businesses, and other stakeholders, facilitated a public engagement effort to develop a shared vision for the southern part of Gowanus, located outside of the neighborhood plan area and within the IBZ and the 3rd Avenue corridor. The goal of this effort was to develop a land use framework and identify infrastructure and workforce development priorities. And as part of the vision plan, a land use framework identified 9th Street as an appropriate location to allow housing and job generating uses, while also bringing pre-existing residential use into conformance and being mindful of 9th Street as a corridor that does experience challenges with trucks, buses, bicyclists, and other road users. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jonah. Only one from me. Can you make the case for, and maybe in a little more detail, for R7A here as opposed to, say, R6A or R6B, which, you know, I think you see a predominance of on one side, whereas you have manufacturing on the other. Can you just lay that out for us a bit?
Sure. So according to the applicant, you know, we also work with them. I would just note that first, the zoning around the area R6A, R6B was mapped as part of the 2003 Park Slope rezoning, which, as you know, is now almost 20 years ago. And so since then, you know, there's been a tremendous need to accommodate growth in this area. And so looking at, you know, potential opportunities for growth, you know, outside of the Gowanus neighborhood plan area, you know, we felt that 9th Street is an appropriate corridor given its proximity to public transit, and also as a connector between neighborhoods. So that's sort of the synopsis that we have, and that the applicant can also elaborate further on that.
Thank you. Vice Chair Knuckles?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Jonah, I just want, following on that, I wanted to clarify, given the proximity of this site to the Gowanus rezoning plan, so this was not considered to be a part of Gowanus in terms of the Gowanus plan? Is that why it was not included?
We didn't include the IBZ as part of land use actions, but we did kind of develop a vision for that area. Mainly, we didn't include it because the conditions of the southern part of Gowanus are a little different. And so the focus was more on the northern part of the neighborhood. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, because my initial question was, you know, why would it not have been a part of the scope of the prior rezoning? But I accept your rationale, John.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Commissioner Rampersad.
Thank you very much. Question for you. With regards to this parking, they're asking for the waiver and they're not looking to put a curb cut in. Because I'm looking at within our package and they're saying it's ill-advised and impractical. But if you're going to propose 16,000 square feet of commercial for a fresh food supermarket, wouldn't they be getting deliveries? So I'm just curious of what is their solution to that? Because they're talking about it would be a direct conflict with pedestrians on the sidewalk and bicyclists in the bike lane. So if you can just approach them with that question, I'm just curious to see their response.
Sure. Thanks for that question, Commissioner. I'll let the applicant team elaborate more when this comes back. But I think they're looking at different kind of on-street loading options. And they're also considering not necessarily having a supermarket for the entire space. So it may be subdivided into different uses.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, Jonah, thank you very much. We appreciate it. This item is certified, the 9th Street rezoning. We're going to move on to our next item here, and I'm going to ask Edwin to note it for us.
Absolutely. Commissioners, the fifth item on our agenda is a certification of a zoning map and zoning text amendment in Brooklyn Community District 12. Our presenter is Josh Vogel.
Thank you, Edwin. Good afternoon, commissioners. And we'll get started on the second slide, please. This is a private application for a zoning map amendment from an R5 C23 district to a C44L within the Special Ocean Parkway District, and a zoning text amendment to Appendix F to facilitate the development of a new mixed-use building, including 114,000 square feet of residential space or 116 dwelling units and 5,500 square feet of commercial space. Next slide, please. Project is located at 1571 McDonald Avenue between Avenues M and N in Midwood, Community District 12, Brooklyn. Next slide, please. Here's an aerial view looking north towards downtown Brooklyn and Manhattan. The project is on the border of Midwood, a neighborhood in the center of South Brooklyn, bounded by Kensington and Flatbush to the north, Flatbush and Marine Park to the east, Sheepshead Bay to the south, and Borough Park to the west. The project area includes the entire of the McDonald Avenue frontage between Avenues M and N, the entire Avenue M frontage, and 3 lots on East 2nd Street on the corner of Avenue M. The elevated F subway line runs along McDonald Ave and is directly in front of the project area. Next slide, please. Here's a similar view, just slightly northeast at the intersection of 60th Street and Avenue N at McDonald. We also see Friends Field Park and Washington Cemetery a block to the north of the project area. Next slide, please. So here's a land use map. We can see McDonald Ave in the center, a major northwest corridor that is 100 feet wide. The project area is outlined in light blue with the development site mid-block in yellow. The light yellow lots on the map are all residential uses in the surrounding area off of McDonald, which range from single-family detached houses to low and medium density apartment buildings. The purple along McDonald, mostly on the west side across from the project area, are industrial uses, primarily auto-oriented and building supplies. McDonald Avenue also has a strong presence of commercial uses, seen in red. These uses include home decor and improvement stores, fast food restaurants, and convenience stores, many with residential units above. The project area is in the R5 C23 Special Ocean Parkway zoning district. An R5 zoning district is a non-contextual zoning district that allows a residential FAR of 1.25 and a maximum FAR of 2 for most community facility uses. A C23 commercial overlay allows commercial uses in a residential district, often on the ground floor, and permits 1 FAR for commercial uses. The Special Ocean Parkway District was approved in 1977 and includes the blocks east and west of Ocean Parkway, including the entirety of the proposed project area. It was created to promote and strengthen the scenic Ocean Parkway corridor by establishing landscaping requirements, community facility bulk regulations, requiring enclosed parking along Ocean Parkway, and preserving the character of the detached and semi-detached 1 and 2 family homes. Directly across the street on McDonald is a C82 district, which allows automotive and other heavy commercial uses along with community facility. To the west is an R6 district, also a non-contextual residential district that permits a maximum residential FAR of 3 for quality housing buildings and 4.8 for most community facility uses. Portions of the R6 zoning district that front upon McDonald Avenue contain a C13 commercial overlay, which permits up to 2 FAR of commercial use when paired with an R6 zoning district, resulting in commercial uses generally retail on the lower levels of a residential building. To the south of the project area along McDonald is an M11 zoning district, which is a low-density manufacturing district, typically characterized by light manufacturing and warehouse uses. It does not permit residential use. The maximum FAR for commercial and industrial uses is 1 and 2.4 for community facility uses. In addition to Washington Cemetery to the north, Sid Luckman Field and Friends Field are public parks with expansive lawns, tennis courts, and baseball diamonds. The area is well served by mass transit and is located within a transit zone. The elevated tracks for the F subway line run along McDonald Avenue with station entrances located at either end of the proposed project area block. The area is also served by multiple bus lines. The B9 bus service runs along Avenue N, connecting Bay Ridge to Marine Park. The B6 bus service runs along Bay Parkway, connecting Gravesend to East New York. And the B82 bus service runs along Kings Highway, connecting Bensonhurst to Spring Creek. Next slide, please. So here are some site views of the project area. Here looking northeast from the corner of Avenue N and McDonald, we see a row of 2-story residential buildings with ground floor commercial. There's also a 2-family residential building on Avenue N included in the project area, seen here on the far right. Next slide, please. Now this view looks north on McDonald, a 100-foot wide street with the F subway above. The project area is the entire frontage of McDonald on the east side of the street, seen here to the right in this photo. Next slide. Here's a view of the sidewalk conditions on McDonald. The sidewalk here, which includes the entrance to the subway, is 20 feet wide. Next slide, please. Now moving north on McDonald from Avenue N towards Avenue M, we have lot 60, the development site in the middle of the block. The development site was previously a parking lot and a single-story furniture store. The furniture store on the northern end of the development site is applicant-owned and now vacant pending demolition. The parking lot is under construction for World Spa, a full-service spa that received a special permit for a physical culture establishment by the BSA in 2018. As I'll explain later, the proposed development will be a vertical and horizontal enlargement of the spa development. Next slide, please. Now moving north, now looking southeast, we see the single-story vacant furniture store on the far right, which is part of the development site. Moving left from there or north along McDonald, we have a warehouse and then a row of 2-story single and 2-family homes. Next slide, please. And here's one more view of those row homes. The corner of Avenue M is just outside of this view to the far left or north. Next slide, please. And here we can see the corner of Avenue M and McDonald looking southeast. The building on the corner is the Hosk Center, an educational center for people with developmental disabilities. The site received a use and bulk variance by the BSA in 2018 to facilitate the conversion and enlargement of the existing building to a 3-story community facility building for the Hosk Center. Next slide, please. Now moving east, we're now looking south from Avenue M down East 2nd Street. As we can see, the Hosk Center occupies the entire frontage of Avenue M of the project area between McDonald and East 2nd Street. Next slide, please. And finally, the project area includes 3 lots on East 2nd off the corner of Avenue M. This is due to the depth of the C23 commercial overlay on Avenue M. These lots are occupied by 2-story residential buildings and an adult care facility. Next slide, please. The proposed actions would facilitate the enlargement of the spa by adding 10 stories. The mixed-use building would contain approximately 144,000 square feet of floor area or 4.58 FAR. Next slide, please. The proposed development would include a new 2-story commercial use, seen here on the left in orange, where the current furniture store is located. The street wall would set back 5 feet per C44L district regulations. Required accessory parking would be located above on the 2nd and 3rd story adjacent to the elevated train, centering residential units above from the noise of the subway. Above the parking, these residential units would occupy floors 4 through 11, seen here in blue. The residential portion will include approximately 104 dwelling units, of which 37 would be permanently affordable to households with incomes at or below 80% of area median income pursuant to MIH option 2. Next slide, please. Here's a section showing the relationship to the elevated subway. As we see, the C44L district allows the building to step back, widening the sidewalk by 5 feet and to set back 15 feet at the 4th floor where the residential units start. Next slide, please. Here's one more rendering, now looking south at the residential portion and the parking below adjacent to the elevated. Next slide, please. The proposed actions include a zoning map amendment to change the existing R5 C23 district along McDonald Ave to a C44L within a special Ocean Parkway district. The C23 district currently extends along Avenue M between McDonald and East 2nd. The proposed C44L would only be mapped on the McDonald frontage, since this section of Avenue M does not contain commercial uses. Therefore, the current C23 district, which extends at a depth of 150 feet south of Avenue M and covers parts of lots 14, 15, and part of 16 on East 2nd, would be removed, leaving just an R5 Special Ocean Parkway district at the eastern half of Avenue M to the corner of East 2nd. The C44L zoning district is specifically tailored for commercial corridors featuring an elevated subway and is intended to ensure that adequate light and air reach the sidewalk below the elevated rail line by establishing an appropriate distance between a building's upper floor and the subway tracks. It also offers increased flexibility in uses to allow commercial uses below and adjacent to the elevated train, raising the residential above. And we recently certified an application for a C44L district on the McDonald Avenue corridor at 2080 McDonald, south of this project area at Avenue S. The C44L zoning district is a contextual commercial district that allows mixed-use buildings at a residential equivalent of R7A. An R7A zoning district is a contextual zoning district with a maximum residential FAR of 4.6 with permanently affordable housing pursuant to MIH, which would be required in the C44L portion of the project area, and an FAR of 4 for commercial and community facility uses. No parking is required for commercial uses and most community facility uses. Parking for market rate residential units must be provided for 50% of the units, with no parking required for income restricted units within the transit zone. Within MIH designated areas, the maximum base height can rise between 40 and 75 feet, with a maximum building height of 110 feet or 115 feet with a qualifying ground floor. Above the base height, the building must set back at least 10 feet from wide streets and 15 feet from narrow streets. Additionally, for lots fronting an elevated rail line, buildings are required to set back 5 feet from the street line at the ground floor, allowing for the widening of the sidewalk, along with a minimum base height of 25 feet or 2 stories and a maximum base height of 65 feet or 6 stories. Next slide, please. The applicant is also proposing a zoning text amendment to Appendix F to map MIH coterminous with the C44L district, creating permanently affordable housing via MIH option 2 for incomes averaging 80% of area median income. Next slide, please. In summary, this is a private application for a zoning map amendment from an R5 C23 to a C44L district within the Special Ocean Parkway district, and a zoning text amendment to Appendix F to facilitate the development of a new mixed-use building, including 114,000 square feet of residential space or 106 units with 37 permanently affordable and 5,500 square feet of commercial space. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I really just want to pose one question to you, which is about the precedent for C44. Now, you noted that other development that we are, I think it's mid-process right now at 2080 McDonald as another one that is next to a subway line, allows for the setback. But in this case, I guess in both cases, it would take you from a lower density to an R7A. Talk to us for a moment about R7A here in the context of the surrounding area and how that works.
Sure. So the current zoning here has been in place since 1961. And while it may reflect the existing buildings, it doesn't really provide any opportunities for growth. And we have one of the widest streets in the area around here, 100-foot wide street, McDonald Avenue, with the F train above. So it's a perfect area for increased density and mixed income housing, given that transit access and the also open space resources in the area. But the C44L is specifically designed for transit corridors along an elevated It has the 5-foot sidewalk widening to enhance the pedestrian experience, and it allows for the flexibility of uses. So you can have commercial below and adjacent to that, to the elevated, which helps to push and set back the residential uses from the rail line.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Levin.
Yes, thank you, Joshua. I have a question about the affordable housing options. They are proposing to map only option 2, and I wonder how well that matches the area median income and whether this is in fact market rate housing.
Sure. So that would be the area median income here is $64,000 a year. 80% AMI would
okay,
be,
so that,
yeah, so a little lower, so 82,000 for a family of 3.
okay, so but it does come then pretty close to the market. Well, we'll see what the community thinks about that option. It seems like it would be desirable to have at least have both options available for the council.
Noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions? Commissioner Dweck?
Thank you. Since I'm sure the applicant is listening, when it comes back to us, I'd like to hear about any noise mitigation features on the building being so close to the train.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll make sure that the applicant team has that for you when they come back.
Thank you.
For public hearing.
Good call, Commissioner. That was on my mind too. Let's see if anybody else.
I happen to have the privilege of living a block away from the F train, so
Aha, you're an expert.
it's on my mind every day.
I'll bet. I'll bet. Okay, let's see who else we got here. Sorry. I see no other questions from the commission. So we are going to certify 1571 McDonald Avenue. Thank you very much. And we are, I think, Edwin, what do you think? Should we move on to a new borough here?
I believe so. I think we're good to go on the next item.
All right. Let's go.
And it's a very special one. Our 6th item on our agenda is a certification of a UDAP designation and disposition of city-owned property in Bronx Community District 5. Presenting for the first time to the commission is Camilla Thomas.
Thank you, Edwin. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can.
Great. So good afternoon, Commission. This project is 2017 Grand Concourse. Next slide, please. So the applicant, the New York City Housing Preservation and Development, HPD, 6 acquisition, designation of an urban development action area, and approval of an urban development action area project, as well as the disposition of city-owned land located at 2017 Grand Concourse, Block 2808, Lot 90, in the Mott Hope neighborhood of the Bronx Community District 5. The proposed development is a new 9-story residential building with 33 units of affordable housing. Next slide, please. This area map shows the larger local context surrounding the site. Land uses in the immediate vicinity of the development site include residential, commercial, public facilities, and institutional uses. The development site is located within the Special Grand Concourse District, a transit zone, and a first zone. The site is located within an R8X zoning district per the Special Grand Concourse District regulations. The development site is surrounded by R8 to the north, south, east, and west, with C14 commercial overlays on the northwestern portion of Block 2808. The area to the north of the development site includes a C4D4 commercial district. The project is located within the Jerome Avenue neighborhood study area and was identified along with other city-owned property to be developed as affordable housing at a range of incomes that meets the needs of surrounding communities. Next slide, please. Here's an aerial photograph of the project area with the development site highlighted in red. The development site is well served by public transportation as it is served by the BX1, 2, 36, 40, and 42 bus routes, as well as being 0.1 miles north of the Tremont Avenue B and D train stations and 0.3 miles east of the Burnside Avenue 4 train station. Other transit services in the area include the nearby Metro North Harlem line at the Tremont station 0.5 miles east of the project site. Next slide, please. Here's an aerial photograph of Block 2808, where the project site is located. The project site is located on a 3,591 square foot parcel. It has a total of approximately 37 feet of frontage along Grand Concourse and 98 feet along Bush Street. The development site is adjacent to a 9-story health facility to the north and 1 to 4 family homes to the west. On the same block as the development site on 2028 Crescent Avenue is a 2016 newly constructed affordable housing development funded by HPD with approximately 114 apartments. Next slide, please. Here are photos of the existing condition of the site. This photo shows the project site from the left, as seen from the Grand Concourse. Next, I will discuss the background of the site. In 1994, the development site was conveyed to a housing development fund company, HDFC, under the Tenant Interim Lease Program for the purpose of developing co-op housing for persons of low income. The HDFC was unable to adequately operate the building and the site was foreclosed in 2017. In 2018, the City Council approved a ULURP and Article 11 tax exemption to facilitate the transfer of the development site and its rehabilitation under HPD's third-party transfer program. Subsequent analysis of the building by the designated developer revealed that rehabilitation was not feasible, so a new construction project, the development, was proposed. Next slide, please. Photo 2 shows the project site from the Grand Concourse. Here you can see the adjacent 9-story building, which is a health services building. Next slide, please. Photo 3 shows a project site from Bush Street. The development site contains a vacant 3-story walk-up apartment building with 5 residential units and accessory ground floor space, as well as vacant accessory garage structure. Next slide, please. Here's an illustrative rendering of the proposed development. The proposed development includes a new 9-story quality housing residential building with 24,772 square feet of floor area. The proposed development will contain 33 units of affordable housing. The building base height will rise to approximately 87 feet with an overall height of approximately 96 feet, inclusive of the bulkhead. Building amenities include a gym, community room, laundry room, rooftop terrace, 14 bicycle parking spaces, and Wi-Fi in common areas. The proposed development will accommodate formerly homeless senior residents with mobility accessible units, which will be compliant with the Uniform Federal Accessibility Standards. Additional building features will include slip-resistant surfaces throughout the building, pool courts in the refuse room, and handrails and corridors. Next slide, please. This is the ground floor plan for the proposed development. To satisfy the requirements of the Special Grand Concourse District, the proposed development will provide a planter on the Grand Concourse between the building and the sidewalk. Additionally, as the site is located within the transit zone, no accessory off-street parking spaces are required. Next slide, please. This is a list of the proposed units. The proposed development will have 33 units of 100% affordable housing, including approximately 8 affordable independent residences for seniors, heirs units for formerly homeless seniors, plus 1 on-site superintendent unit. The units will include a mix of studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom units. Next slide, please. Once again, the applicant HPD is seeking acquisition, designation of a UDAP, and approval of a UDAP and designation of city-owned land to facilitate the development of the project site for housing for extremely low to low-income New Yorkers. The proposed project would help meet the Jerome Avenue neighborhood study commitment to advance affordable housing development on publicly owned land. Next slide, please. The proposed actions would facilitate the development of the proposed 9-story, 33 units, 100% affordable housing development on a currently underutilized vacant site. That concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Great stuff. Thank you, Camilla. Bravo. Sounded great. Let me go first to Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you, Chair. Well done, Ms. Thomas.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. And I don't know if you know this, but perhaps you can find out. I'm just curious as to whether or not the what I assume would be five occupants of the units in the existing building under the TIL program who are no longer there, would those individuals or would those families have the opportunity to access this project upon its completion? I'd like to know that.
I don't know the answer to the question right now, but I'll look into it with the applicant. It's a great question.
HPD should be able to answer that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Commissioner Levin.
Thank you, Camilla, and welcome to our midst. It's very nice to see new faces making presentations. I have a question about the impact of this project on the 10-story, 9-story health facility to the north. It looks like there's a whole row of lot line windows, but it also looks like from our package that that building is built to the lot line and this new building is proposed to be built to the lot line. So what's going to be the impact on the health facility?
Yes, so the health facility is basically a building that's full of offices for example, dentistry, pediatricians, etc. Those windows, according to HPD, from the information that I received, they will be blocked by the wall. I wasn't able to get more information on whether or not the windows will be blocked completely or if they will be bricked up, but I will be finding out with HPD.
Right, and so it's important for us to understand their status. I assume they're not legally required windows, but we should know that when it comes back for the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi, Camilla. Thank you for your presentation. Interested in the conditions along Bush Street at the ground floor. I know that, there's a supers unit and I'm not sure, I'm trying to read this plan. Admittedly, I probably need my glasses, but there is a unit in the very back of the building. Is that the case? It says 1D.
Yes, there's a unit in the very back.
So curious, how I think it's lovely when there are first floor units if they're treated properly at the ground floor and there's some sort of privacy screening or landscaping that, in an ideal world, an elevated window that, offers the residential unit some modicum of privacy and offers also the pedestrian a little softening of the experience between the resident and between the unit and themselves. So, if we could mention this to the developer, I'd be interested in what their plans are to sort of soften that situation for those units.
Yep, I'll be finding out. That's a great question. So I also had a similar concern, but we'll be finding out about that too. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Other questions from the commission? All right, seeing none. Camilla, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We are going to certify 2017 Grand Concourse and pivot to another borough. So Edwin?
Yes, going to another borough. The seventh item on our agenda, commissioners, is a referral of a non-ULURP modification to a previously approved special permit in Manhattan Community District 3. Our presenter is Matt Pietris.
Good afternoon, Commission. This is a public-private application by NYCHA and Madison Realty Capital for a non-ULURP modification to an existing large-scale residential development. Next slide, please. The address is at 644 East 14th Street, which is the southwest corner of East 14th and Avenue C. The applicants, again, are NYCHA and Madison Realty Capital. The action is a non-ULURP modification to an existing LSRD. And the proposed development that would be facilitated by this action is a 24-story mixed-use development with 166 units, 50 of which would be affordable, just over 2,000 square feet of community facility space, which is intended as use as a daycare, and just over 1,000 square feet of retail. Next slide. The surrounding area is primarily residential with smaller scale buildings along the mid-blocks, typical of the East Village neighborhood. Taller buildings exist along the active retail corridors like 14th, Avenues A, B, and C. There are also a lot of community gardens, including and Tompkins Square Park and other open spaces like East River Park. The zoning is typical of these types of buildings. So the R72 zoning, which is the zoning for the development site, facilitates tower in the park style developments. The R7A and R8B districts, which we see to the bottom left of this map on the right, facilitate contextual districts. The M32, which is heavy industrial use, which is in the upper right-hand corner of this map, is for the Con Edison power plant. As far as transit, the nearest subway station is the First Avenue L station, which is to the west of the site. And the site is also well served by buses. Next slide. Here we're looking at the development site looking towards downtown. So we're looking southwest here. In the center of the screen in yellow is the development site already built. On the left and right of that building are Campus 1 and 2, which are existing buildings on a NYCHA campus. To the bottom right, we see Stuytown, which is directly across 14th Street from the site. In the bottom left, we see the Con Edison power plant. And just beyond that, we see One Haven Plaza, which is a taller residential building that is just a block south of the site. Behind in the background, we see the East Village neighborhood, which has lower rise buildings along the mid blocks, as well as Tompkins Square Park. Next slide. This is a view of the project area looking southwest. We can see that the site is currently vacant. Next slide. And this is a view looking east towards Avenue C on East 14th Street. On the left is Stuytown. In the background is the Con Edison power plant. And on the right are a series of row houses, which are not included in the LSRD, but are on the same subject block as the development site and a large scale. Next slide. For the background, there was an urban renewal area established for the area, and the LSRD was established in the late 1960s. In 1972, there were a series of modifications that the existing buildings at the large scale sought. These are bulk waivers related to yards, height and setback. These allowed for the construction of 4 buildings with just under 500 total units. In 1980, there was a minor change to the urban renewal area and minor changes to the site plan. And in 1983, there was a sliver parcel conveyed by NYCHA to the adjacent owner, which is going to be subject of this action as well, just to update the site plan to reflect that change. In 2009, the urban renewal area expired. In 2015, permits were filed to demolish a 1-story structure which existed on the development site. So the development site is shown in yellow in the image on the right, and it's currently vacant. In 2018, NYCHA and the city announced NYCHA 2.0, which is a program to secure funding for capital improvements at existing NYCHA campuses. And part of that proposal is NYCHA's Transfer to Preserve program, which allows for the sale of development rights, unused development rights from NYCHA campuses to adjacent property owners, and then using the sale, the funds from that sale to fund capital improvements at the NYCHA campus. Next slide. This is a chart or a map showing the previously granted waivers. So on the right, we see in red, there were 4 waivers that were granted in 1972. They were at Campus 1 and Campus 2. These were really related to height and setback and distance between buildings and rear yard requirements. So this slide is really meant to show that the existing building does not affect those previously granted waivers and that it continues to meet the findings of the large scale. Next slide. The proposed development is shown in the center of the image on the right. It would rise 234 feet or 24 stories, and it would contain 166 units, 50 of which would be affordable. It would have just over 2,000 square feet of community facility space, just over 1,000 square feet of retail space, which would be on the corner of Avenue C and East 14th Street. Next slide, please. For the requested action, the applicants are seeking a non-ULURP modification to reflect several changes to the large scale. The first is related to that sliver portion of land I mentioned in the background. So it's to exclude that conveyed sliver of land that's just on the northwestern boundary of the LSRD. It cannot be seen in this image, but I'll zoom in the next slide. The second change is related to the inclusion of the development site within the large scale. So all of the changes that we're really going to see are going to be in the upper right-hand corner of the site plan. So this is a site plan facing north, and the development site is in the northeast corner of the block. The third change is to merge the NYCHA zoning lot, which is one large zoning lot that is for all 4 buildings, and merge that with the development site to allow for the transfer of development rights. And the final change is to show the construction of the new building on the development site within the large scale. And I'm going to walk through these changes now. Next slide, please. So the image on the right shows the site plan, and we're zooming in quite far to see the sliver portion. So the sliver portion is about 55 square feet. It's only about 18 inches wide. This was sold to the adjacent property owner in 1983. And so this action is to represent that change on the site plan. As a separate action, NYCHA has also redrawn the tax lot to convey this, to show this portion as well. Next slide. The next series of slides are going to show the existing large scale on the left, the proposed changes on the right. Again, most of these changes are going to be focused on this upper right-hand corner where the development site is located. So here we see the inclusion of the development site in the large scale. So on the left, we see the existing boundaries does not include it. And on the right, we see that it does. Next slide, please. This is a similar image. Instead, it also shows the zoning lot. So on the left, we see the zoning lot, which is one big zoning lot for all of the NYCHA buildings. And on the right, we see that the zoning lot would now include the development site. And this would also allow for the transfer of about 108,000 square feet of floor area. And the funds from this sale of unused development rights would be used to fund capital improvements at Campos Plaza 2. Next slide, please. The last modification is to show the addition of the new building to the site plan. So on the left, we see just the 4 existing buildings that are located there. And on the right, we see the new building, which is shown in yellow. Next slide, please. This is a summary slide showing the existing versus proposed conditions of the site plan. So emergence of the zoning lot, extension of the LSRD boundary, and then inclusion of the new building, all on the development site. Next slide, please. To summarize, this is a non-ULURP modification to an existing large scale. The applicants are NYCHA and Madison Realty Capital. For environmental review, NYCHA is the lead agency, and they issued a negative declaration last week. And the proposed development would be a 24-story mixed-use building with 166 units, 50 of which would be affordable. It would also contain community facility space and retail. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Matt. And I think that I know the answer to this one, but just for the benefit of the commission, anybody watching, including a development site into an existing large scale plan, that is allowed. So to expand an existing large scale plan, under what circumstances is that permitted?
So you are allowed to extend the boundaries of a large scale if there are no existing buildings in the expanded area. So large scales generally are meant to be planned as a unit, resulting in a better site plan. So they have a little bit more flexible of zoning rules. And so if you have an existing building, you can expand to include that. So the reason this one's allowed to expand is because there's nothing on that site. And the inclusion of the development site in the large scale allows for that transfer of floor area. So that's why they're coming in.
Let's see if there are questions. Commissioner Levin.
Yes, Matthew, you explained that this is part of NYCHA's 2.0 Transfer to Preserve program, which generates funds for capital repairs. Do we know what those capital repairs are going to be and what the budget is?
We know that they're going to be at Compost 2. So Compost 2 is the building that's on the north of the block. Compost 1 kind of recently went through a series of NYCHA improvements related to a different program. NYCHA is going to be better able to talk to what specifically they're going for after this transfer is done, though.
Okay, and have the Compost 2, or the Compost overall tenants been involved in planning these capital improvements?
Yes, and they've also been involved in ongoing discussions NYCHA has been with the Tenants Association related to this project as a whole. There's been several meetings, which has also resulted in the change of the building's form. So it used to be a little bit taller, but based off of feedback with the Tenants Association, the building has shrunk. But yes, ongoing conversations are happening.
Excellent. It'd be good to have a comprehensive understanding of that when it comes back to the public hearing.
Absolutely.
Actually, it won't. It's a minor modification, so never mind. But
when
it comes back from a referral.
Yes, yes, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Edie?
Thank you and good afternoon. Can you explain the reason and the benefit of excluding the sliver lot from the LSRD and zoning lot? I don't think I fully understood.
Sure. I think it's best explained as a cleanup action. So it's actually that sliver lot. The reason that it looks a little sawtoothed is because there's a building there. So it's this on the map. It shows that a portion of an existing building is both inside and outside of a large scale, which isn't allowed. And so this is just kind of excluding it from there. There was no floor area generated by this parcel, so there wasn't really an issue with it. So this is a very minor change that's just reflecting something that happened over just about 40 years ago.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Knuckles?
Thank you, Chair. Matthew, I just wanted to key in on the source of the air rights. Does this come from the parking space within Compost or the open space? Where precisely does that, more than 100,000 square feet of FAR come from?
All the above. So it's one zoning lot that captures the parking lot, that captures the buildings, that captures the open space. So it's just the unused rights from that large zoning lot.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Commissioner Goodrich?
Hi, thanks for the presentation. My question is, I think this is something that should just be part of, I'm just putting it out there. So if there are if there's 30% of affordable units, then what happens with the NYCHA residents that would have been able to live there?
Would have been able to live where?
So so we know that NYCHA is public housing and it's 100% affordable. So as part of the plan, what happens with the non-affordable units? What happens with the residents who would have been able to live there? Or is this no one is?
Yeah, so no displacement here. So there's 4 buildings that currently exist. This will be the 5th added. So this is a completely new building that's mixed affordability. We can certainly have NYCHA and their development partners speak to the affordability levels in the new building, but there's no displacement of existing tenants that would result from this. What used to be on that site was a 1-story, I believe, garage, so that it wasn't even a residential use back in 2015. So there was no displacement of people from that.
I think, well, we won't hear any testimony, right? So I think I'll just say one of the criticisms of obviously NYCHA 2.0 is if there is going to be more affordable housing, especially in the context of NYCHA, that it wouldn't actually be for 100% for the residents. So that's just
understood.
And a comment just throwing out there.
Absolutely. And yes, we'll certainly pass along these comments to NYCHA when they come back.
They hear from me. So
good. Well, they can always hear again. That's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Burney?
Yes, I actually had a slightly similar question. I think there have been previous cases where NYCHA has sold off part of their campus to private development, and residents have been given priority in renting the apartments that are built by the developer, whether it's just the 50 affordable or others. And I'm just wondering, is there any priority given to NYCHA residents, at least in the affordable units that are being built?
I'm not aware of any kind of allocated sites for NYCHA residents. I know that they are still kind of hammering out what the unit count is going to be. So I think if that were to come back into play, we could certainly have NYCHA speak to that.
Yeah, I
in
mean,
the
one
future.
thing they've looked at in the past, NYCHA, is, for example, I don't know if this is the case at Campus Plaza, but there are some developments where there are under-occupied apartments. So you may have a family unit, and because people have moved out or whatever, you've got one person occupying a 2 or a 3 bedroom, and they've encouraged those people to move out into smaller units, thereby liberating bigger units for families on the waiting list. You know, that kind of deal that they can do with the developer when they have the ability to do the kind of deal that they're doing here. So I'd just be interested to know if they're planning something along those lines.
Great. That's certainly something I think that we'll have them speak to, kind of how this new development fits into the campus as a whole.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Goodrich? Did you have another
I thought of one other thing, and this isn't like a directed at Matthew, but I just find it really interesting. I've represented NYCHA tenants for years. And, you know, this is one of the main complaints I hear where I have to say, because this is the main thing, you know, the repairs are often atrocious, like mold and like mushrooms growing out of walls, things that I've never seen before. And I find it really interesting that, you know, a new building development that likely wouldn't have those type of dilapidated building type repairs. Only 20% of the residents likely would even be able to access it, which is unfair. And that's an understatement. So I just figured it just another statement, not a question, just another statement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Goodrich. Seeing no other questions or comments on this one, I am going to refer this project out to Manhattan Community Board 3 for 45 days. And we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda. Edwin, please.
Yes, indeed. The 8th item on our agenda is a post-referral renewal of a previously approved authorization. Our presenter is Jasmine Topali.
Jasmine, I think you might need to unmute your mic.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. Let me start. Good afternoon, commissioners. This is a private application for the first renewal of an authorization that was previously approved on December 13, 2017. The authorization permitted the horizontal enlargement of the existing arcade. The horizontal enlargement is also referred to as the infill or the enclosure of the existing arcade. So the arcade enclosure will allow for retail uses on the ground floor and residential uses on the newly created second floor. There will also be design upgrades to 2 existing plazas on the site, which is located at 200 Water Street in Manhattan Community District 1. The renewal of the authorization is pursuant to Section 1143. So in order to renew the authorization, the CPC shall find that the facts upon which the authorization were granted have not substantially changed. And in this case, the applicant is proposing no changes from the original application. For this presentation, I'll be summarizing the project as it was originally considered by the CPC in 2017. Next slide. 200 Water Street is located in Lower Manhattan. It's within the Water Street subdistrict in the special Lower Manhattan district. Next slide. The site's boundaries include Fulton Street to the north, Water Street to the east, John Street to the south, and Pearl Street to the west, and the lot is mapped on a C64 district. Next slide. The site is 1 block west of the South Street Seaport and Pier 17. Several blocks north of the site is the Brooklyn Bridge, and southwest of the site is 120 Broadway, which is Department of City Planning's location. The surrounding area is predominantly commercial, particularly along the waterfront east of Water Street. And the area also features many residential and mixed-use buildings, including the site itself, which is residential and commercial. There is limited manufacturing and institutional uses as well, such as the South Street Seaport Museum. Next slide. So this is just a brief reminder of the background of the project. The Water Street text amendment was approved on January 21st, 2016, and it allowed for the infill of existing arcades for retail uses by certification or authorization, depending on the site. So you can see the Water Street subdistrict map to the right, and 200 Water Street is outlined in the yellow. 200 Water Street was the first application under the Water Street text amendment to be approved. Next slide. At the site, there's an existing 31-story building that contains residential units above and ground floor retail. There are 3 existing plazas and an arcade, which you can see on this map here. The previously approved development, which I'll go into the detail later, involves the arcade and Plaza B, which are both along Fulton Street, and Plaza C, which is on the corner of John and Pearl Street. Plaza A, which currently sits in front of an existing Starbucks, received design upgrades in 2012. And just to note, the authorization bundles the arcade infill with the plaza design upgrades, because in order for a developer to infill the arcade, they must provide a compensating amenity, which in this case is improvements to Plaza B and Plaza C. Next slide. So here you can see the arcade and Plaza B, which are both along Fulton Street. Currently, there is an existing Duane Reade that one can access through the arcade. Its current lease is estimated to end around January 2024. And as part of their lease, Duane Reade has the option for a 5-year renewal, which can bring them through around January 2029. Next slide. So here you can see Plaza B and the arcade highlighted. The arcade is considered a double height arcade, which is why the top portion on the 2nd floor is highlighted. This area is part of the approved horizontal enlargement, which is also known as the arcade enclosure. Next slide. The approved 2017 design enclosed a majority of the existing 3,222 square feet arcade. It resulted in approximately 2,922 square feet of ground floor retail and approximately 1,778 square feet of new 2nd floor residential space. The arcade enclosure will create space for at least 2 ground floor retail establishments. There will be a small corner portion of the remaining arcade on the corner of Water and Fulton Street. At Plaza B, which sits in front of the arcade, there's going to be planting, seating, and other amenities, which you can get a sense of here in the rendering. Next slide. Plaza C, which you can see highlighted here, is an approximately 527 square feet plaza and currently has no amenities. Next slide. The proposed development would add planning, seatings, and other amenities, which you can also get a sense of here in this rendering. Next slide. The authorization was approved because it met the findings outlined in section 91841. The approval was granted for a period of 4 years, and the applicant can renew for up to 2 3-year terms where it will lapse after 10 years. So the renewal of this authorization is pursuant to section 1143. And as I mentioned earlier, in order to renew the authorization, the CPC shall find that the facts upon which the authorization were granted have not substantially changed. And in this case, the applicant is proposing no changes. Next slide. On March 22nd, 2022, Community Board 1 voted to oppose the renewal, where 37 were in favor, 1 opposed, and 6 abstained. They opposed the original application in 2017, and because there are no changes to the existing application, they expressed that their original 2017 resolution still stands. The board expressed 8 issues in their resolution. 2 of their main concerns were that the benefit to the property owner outweighed the community benefit from the plaza upgrades, and that the design of the plaza didn't reflect the importance of the site as a gateway to the historic South Street Seaport. So in sum, this is the first 3-year renewal for an authorization that was previously granted in 2017 to allow for the infill of the arcade and for design updates to 2 existing plazas. The applicant was not able to begin construction, mainly because of the existing Duane Reade's lease terms. Additionally, the Plaza B, Plaza C, and the arcade are currently empty, but there are plans for an interim long-term event on Plaza B that will bring art to the plaza, which will also double as seating. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. I have a very simple one, I think. When in order to renew this, City Planning Commission needs to find that the circumstances have not changed from the first application. And the circumstances, we're talking about the physical space. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And has the physical space changed in any way?
No, it remains the same from when they considered it in 2017.
Okay, sounds like the standard has been met, at least from from where I sit then. Let me see if there are other questions. Oh, I see a quick. There it is. Under the wire, Commissioner Burney, go ahead.
Just quickly, where does it go from here? Is this go to a public hearing?
Well, what would happen is we would, I was about to call for a vote to send a letter to the buildings department, which would say that the circumstances are present here that would allow for a renewal. So that's where it goes.
I see. So even if the circumstances are atrocious, we're still obliged to agree. Is that the case? I mean, because this is like an egregious recanting of what was supposed to be a public amenity that's now being privatized. And that was the case in 2017. And the community board is absolutely right that that is the case again today. So why would we approve a renewal of it?
Go ahead, Jasmine.
Sure. I think the way that the zoning text is written, that because it was approved in 2017, that unless something had changed from then there's no reason not to approve it.
Well, I don't know. It seems to me, if this is a vote, I'm voting against it, but I guess it's not a vote. It's just a renewal, ministerial matter, right?
Yeah.
That's correct. So yes, in fact, unless anybody wants to jump in for the legal detail, my understanding is it is a finding that the circumstances have not changed. That is what we are. That is the very specific item, which is why I presented my question to Jasmine the way I did. It's not really a question of, is this the right policy, not the right policy? It's an existing policy that was decided, and our finding is simply, have the circumstances changed here? Anything I got wrong, Stephen or Jasmine?
No, that's absolutely correct. That's why it's a renewal. And you're just looking at if anything has changed regarding to the design, if they were proposing something different, or if something changed with the building itself, but those have all stayed the same and nothing has changed. So none of that has changed from the original approval.
Okay, I get it. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Has that scoping determination feel to it, doesn't it, Commissioner?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. I'm sorry, Commissioner Goodridge.
Sorry, I'll go after the next commissioner. Sorry, I'm just reading something on the briefing package.
Oh, okay.
Unless I'm the last one.
No, it's okay. Commissioner Edie.
No, thank you. Just regarding the nature of our action today, if I understand correctly, and if the lawyers are on board, please correct me. What we're doing today is not an approval, but just a renewal of the actual action. So the standards are lower, I guess. We're not approving it. It's already been approved. We're
That's
just
correct.
renewing it, if I understood correctly.
Yes, you're understanding it correctly.
I think most accurately is we're making a finding. We're making a finding that circumstances have not changed. That's it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Goodridge, are you ready?
And so to follow up on Commissioner Edie's question, and then Commissioner Burney's point, is what we're doing, because is what we're doing really considered a circumvention of the original vote?
Well, I mean, from where I sit and the way I understand it, and then you all can correct me if I've said anything wrong here, is no, not a circumvention.
Yeah.
Not a circumvention.
This is a rhetorical question.
It's a renewal of an existing authorization that has expired, and there's a right to a renewal if circumstances have not changed. So now they're here for renewal. They've presented facts and circumstances that have not changed. Therefore, that's what the rule says. Make a finding that circumstances have not changed. So that's why I asked the question to Jasmine. Has anything changed? Nothing's changed. It's sort of just a renewal here.
And so if I'm correct, the community board's main opposition is the architectural design, or is it, did I miss that, or is it, you could, because I heard 8 things, but I heard the main thing being the architectural design.
Yeah, they outlined 8 things in their resolution, but I highlighted 2 of them. Sorry, let me just go back. One of their issues was just that the benefit to the property owner outweigh the community benefit from the plaza upgrades. And then the second was the design of the plazas didn't reflect the historic South Street Seaport.
Which is funny because I'm actually a block away from there right now.
I think generally speaking, the community board was not super enthusiastic about the Water Street text amendment, which allowed for these arcades to be infilled from their barren landscape. There, I don't know if you remember seeing them or being down there, but a lot of the pops and a lot of the arcades are just, concrete bunkers. And I think that was part of the impetus, was to activate this area with the new residential development that's been happening in Community District 1, that people would want more active uses, more food, more, retail, those types of things that can activate it. So I think that was the impetus, one of the impetus for having the text amendment, and the community board. I think a portion of them wanted to keep things as is.
Is it that, and again, this isn't rhetorical, I'm just trying to find, is it that from the community board standpoint as well, the proposed project would bring in more tourist foot traffic and it would be less residential?
That was actually one of their main concerns, that it was already a lively corner of the street, considering its location, and that it didn't need further activation.
Okay, now I feel like I have a better sense. Thank you. That was helpful.
Sure.
Sure. Other questions, comments? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to seek assent by voice vote to send a letter to the buildings department making the findings as discussed here. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I suppose so. Yes. All
Aye. Aye, and I suppose so. What do you get? That's an aye, Commissioner.
Abstain.
That's kind of an aye, yeah, a reluctant aye.
And then abstentions.
Abstain.
Okay, was that you, Commissioner Goodrich?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, we got you. Okay, so we've got we've got an aye with an abstention. Thanks very much, and we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the Manhattan pre-hearing. We're on the 2 pre-hearing items now. Edwin, thank you.
Absolutely, and we may consider making I suppose so as a voting category.
Why not? Let's do it. I think we'll go for it.
The 9th item on our agenda, Commissioners, is a pre-hearing review of a zoning map and zoning text amendments, special permit, acquisition, and disposition of city-owned property in Manhattan Community District 4. Our presenter is Andy Cantu.
Thanks, Edwin. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Can we go to slide 2, please? Thanks. This is the Lirio coming back for a pre-hearing review. The Department of Housing Preservation and Development is requesting a series of actions to facilitate a 100% affordable residential and commercial development at 806 9th Avenue in the Hell's Kitchen, Clinton neighborhood of Manhattan Community District 4. The actions being sought include a zoning map amendment, a zoning text amendment, a special permit, disposition of city-owned property, and acquisition of city-owned property. I'll discuss the recommendations in greater detail later, but as a preview, the community board voted to disapprove the application with conditions, and the borough president recommended approval with conditions. Next slide, please. So just to orient everyone again, because it has been a little while, the project area is located within the preservation area subdistrict of the Special Clinton District, on the block bounded by 8th and 9th Avenues between West 53rd and West 54th Streets. Land uses in the surrounding area are highly diverse and include 4 to 6 story walk-up tenements, many with ground floor retail along the avenues, multifamily elevator buildings along the mid-blocks ranging from 6 to 23 stories, large commercial office buildings, especially to the east across 8th Avenue, and a small number of institutional uses, such as the Midtown Community Court and the NYPD 18th Precinct building, which are both located within the rezoning area. Zoning districts in the surrounding area include R8 residential districts, C15 commercial overlays, and C62 and C64 commercial districts, as well as the special Midtown district located to the east. The area is well served by public transit with at least 10 subway lines in the immediate area, and Central Park is located about 5 blocks to the north. Next slide. This is an aerial view looking east. In the foreground is the development site, which is currently a surface parking lot. And beyond that, on the same zoning lot, the MTA Rail and Power Control Center, which is a hugely important piece of public infrastructure that oversees the operation of the entire subway system. The immediate vicinity is generally low and mid-rise, and then to the east across 8th Avenue is really where Midtown starts, and you have a significant shift in the scale of development, which becomes much taller. Next slide, please. This is just a closer look at the development site. The area that would actually be built upon is the parking lot that services the MTA Rail and Power Control Center. Next slide. Here's a view of the Power Control Center looking southeast along 54th Street. The next slide. And here's a view of the parking lot looking southwest from 54th Street. Next slide. I'll just quickly summarize the proposed building program. The project will include a little over 92,000 square feet of residential floor area, representing 111 permanently affordable units, including a mix of studio 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. 44 of those units, or 40% of the total, are anticipated to be affordable to households earning between 40 to 80% AMI. 67 units, or 60% of the total, will be set aside for formerly unhoused individuals and families, 59 of which will be supportive housing for those living with HIV and AIDS. 1,500 square feet will be dedicated to tenant support services, including on-site case management and programming. The building will also include over 7,300 square feet of landscaped open area for residents. The development will also include over 37,000 square feet of commercial floor area. Approximately 30,000 square feet will be used for expansion office space for the MTA, 7,000 square feet as ground floor retail, as well as 15 covered parking spaces for use by MTA emergency response vehicles. Next slide. So the applicant, in order to facilitate the proposed development, is requesting a zoning map amendment from the existing R8 and R8 with a C15 commercial overlay to a C62 zoning district. Next slide. Given the significant modifications that the preservation area places on the underlying zoning, this map amendment would not result in any change to maximum FAR, height, setback, lot coverage, or yard regulations. The increased commercial FAR allowance from 2 to 4.2 would allow for commercial development on the parking lot site. Currently, the existing MTA facility uses up all of the available commercial floor area on the zoning lot. C62 districts allow for an expanded range of commercial uses, including use group 12C, public service establishments, which is what the new MTA office space would be considered. C62 districts also allow commercial uses to occupy space above the first story in mixed use buildings, which is not the case in C1 districts. Next slide, please. Action 2 is an amendment to the special Clinton district text, which would create additional waivers to bulk regulations in the preservation area, including lot area coverage, rear yard, and landscaped open area requirements. I'll note that we are simply sort of building off the existing special permit framework that already exists for height and setback waivers. So in order to qualify for the special permit, the text amendment adds 3 conditions. The zoning lot must be at least 40,000 square feet. It must front on a wide street, and it must contain existing public infrastructure. And this proposed text was very narrowly tailored to apply to only 2 sites. The MTA site we have here and the DEP-owned site on 10th Avenue, which is the subject of a separate ULURP application currently in public review. The amendment also creates 4 findings for the special permit and consolidates the existing height and setback waiver into a single section in the zoning resolution. So a little bit of zoning resolution cleanup. Next slide. Action 3 is a special permit to waive height, setback, lot coverage, and landscaped open area requirements. On your right is a diagram highlighting the various height and setback waiver areas. In various places, the proposed development, which is slated to be 99 feet tall, exceeds the maximum base and maximum building heights. The height and setback waiver has one condition. The building cannot exceed 115 feet in height within 100 feet of a wide street, or 99 feet in height beyond 100 feet of a wide street. And the proposed development meets this condition. In order to grant the special permit, the CPC must find that the distribution of bulk permits adequate access to light and air to surrounding streets and properties. I'll just note that although it's a little bit hard to see in this rendering, there is a 60 foot by 70 foot courtyard in the interior of the building. Next slide. The height and setback relief being sought has changed since the application was certified in January in response to comments from the community board, necessitating the filing of an A application. On your left is the original proposed massing, which had an 85 foot base height along 9th Avenue without the required 10 foot setback, with a maximum building height of 85 feet within most of the area within 100 feet of 9th Avenue. And the modified massing on your right lowers the base height along 9th Avenue to 66 feet with the required 10 foot setback. However, that floor area was then placed on top of the building so that more of the structure rises to 99 feet within 100 feet of 9th Avenue. Next slide. So this rendering from the ground just shows how the new base height of 66 feet aligns with the neighboring buildings. Next slide. The applicant has also agreed to additional requests from the community board that are outside the scope of the special permit. Notably, the brick color has changed to be more in keeping with the nearby tenements. The double height entrance along 54th Street has been scaled down, and the commercial space frontage along 9th Avenue will be redesigned to enhance the pedestrian experience and recreate the feel of having multiple storefronts. Next slide. Next is the lot coverage waiver. The preservation area regulations permit 70% lot coverage within 100 feet of a wide street and 60% coverage beyond that. The proposed development includes 100% lot coverage within 100 feet of 9th Avenue and 93% beyond that. And this request is really necessary to accommodate the commercial floor area for the MTA. Next slide, please. The third component of the special permit is the waiver to landscaped open area requirements. Preservation area regulations require that the equivalent of 20% of the zoning lot area be set aside as landscaped open area for residents. But because the MTA building takes up so much of the zoning lot, strict compliance with this requirement would essentially mean that the entire roof of the new building be reserved for open space, which is infeasible. Next slide. So the applicant's proposing to include approximately 7,361 square feet of landscaped open area on the interior terrace and rooftop of the proposed development, which will be open to all residents. And this corresponds to 33% of lot area if we exclude the portion of the zoning lot containing the MTA building. And as a result of the A application, the configuration of the landscaped open area has changed a little bit, but the total square footage remains the same as the certified application. Next slide. The fourth and fifth actions are disposition and acquisition of city-owned property. As part of the arrangement between HPD, the MTA, and the project sponsor, 35,518 square feet of excess development rights pertinent to the MTA building will be disposed of and utilized in the proposed development. In addition, the city will acquire 30,466 square feet of floor area in the cellar, first and second floors in the proposed development. And upon completion of the project, this space will be leased back to the MTA to expand the office footprint of the control center building. Next slide. So Community Board 4 voted 32-7 to disapprove with conditions the overall application, but they did include some sort of line item recommendations for each of the actions. With respect to the zoning map and zoning text amendments, they voted to disapprove with conditions. For the special permit, height and setback voted to approve with conditions, and lot coverage and landscape open area voted to approve. For the acquisition of city-owned property, they voted to disapprove with conditions, and the disposition action, they voted to approve with conditions. Next slide. Here is a list of this community board's requested changes or conditions for their approval. The first is to maintain the existing zoning and accommodate the MTA office space through a mayoral zoning override. The second is to dispose of the 35,500 square feet from the MTA site, but for residential use only. Related to that, they requested to eliminate or reduce the office space acquisition in order to create more affordable units. They requested that the income bands be changed to allow for moderate and middle income households rather than very low and low income households. They asked to replace the special permit to modify non-FAR bulk regulations with a text amendment to exempt the MTA DEP sites from lot coverage and yard requirements as of right. They requested that the applicant modify the facade design to be more contextual, which they did. And finally, they requested a grocery store use for the ground floor commercial space. Next slide. The borough president recommended approval with conditions, and his conditions largely reflect those of the community board. First, he requested a withdrawal of the proposed commercial rezoning and accommodate the office use via another mechanism, or limit the rezoning area simply to the development site. Two, modify the special permit waivers for rear yards and lot coverage so that they only apply to the development site and the DEP site. And I'll just note that the proposed text as drafted does accomplish this. It's very, very narrowly tailored just to these two sites. Three, eliminate or reduce the MTA office component and use that space for more affordable housing. Four, work with the community board to arrive at a facade design that is more contextual, which they have. And five, include a grocery store in the ground floor commercial space. The next slide. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much. Just a couple for me, and maybe these will be best posed to community board members who testify on Wednesday. But I note that there's a recommendation to use mayoral zoning override and to not use special permit, but rather do similar things with text amendment. What is the motivation here? It sounds like there's some comfort on some of these things. It sounds like there's some comfort with the end result, but some concern about the specific procedure that is being used here. Can you help understand what's going on?
Right. So you mean elaborate on the community board's concern?
Yeah.
So with respect to the zoning map amendment and the zoning text amendment, my sense is the community board's overall concern is that these changes represent what to them are sort of major changes to the special Clinton district zoning and the special Clinton district text, which have been in place since the 70s. And I believe to them, this in a way may set an undesirable precedent and from their perspective, that may signal that were these changes to go through, it may signal to developers or future applicants that, you know, changes to the special Clinton district text or zoning are, you know, may open it up to more changes. And I believe from their perspective, they would really want to, you know, preserve the integrity of these rules.
Okay, so it's an effort to preserve the existing rules present in that special district. And as a substantive matter, it seems like the biggest concern is about eliminating office space acquisition and allowing for the creation of more affordable units. Is that the biggest substantive issue that's present here?
The biggest substantive issue is probably the map amendment, which of course is related to creating or allowing for that new office space. That coupled with the affordability levels, those would probably be the two main concerns on the part of the community board.
Okay, all right, let's see if there are questions from commissioners. Commissioner Levin.
Well, not so much a question, but to amplify what Andrew's answered just now. I think it's vitally important to Community Board 4 that we all remember that this site became a development site as a result of the Western Rail Yards rezoning, and that there was a points of agreement that was negotiated for this site and for the DEP site that specified levels of affordability. To put it in context with other things that were happening elsewhere in Community Board 4. And so what was negotiated was that this would be for moderate and middle income housing, because the other mechanisms at play were generating low income housing and were struggling to meet the needs of moderate and middle income housing. Now, obviously the housing situation in the city has changed dramatically since then. There is nonetheless a negotiated agreement that was signed with the council that made a commitment to affordability levels that HPD has chosen to overlook in this case. And I think that community board is profoundly upset about walking away from that agreement.
Right, and I'll just note that the points of agreement are included in your briefing packet, but I do think it is, not to diminish what you said, Commissioner, but I think it is important to note that the signed points of agreement stipulate that the units will be available to those earning less than 165% AMI, which the proposed project does conform to.
I think the community board will probably refine our understanding of all of that, trusting that they'll be showing up on Wednesday to tell us what's what.
Indeed.
We'll look forward to that. And thank you, Commissioner Levin, for that insight. And okay, let me see if there are other questions here. Okay, seeing none, we will send this one over to a public hearing on Wednesday. And let's go to our final pre-hearing item of the day in Queens. Edwin.
Yes, indeed. Our 10th item on our agenda is a pre-hearing review of a zoning map and zoning text amendment in Queens Community District 6. Our presenter is Joy Razor.
Good afternoon, commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Next slide, please. This application is returning to the commission after it was certified on January 31st. This is a private application for a zoning map amendment from an R4B low-density contextual zoning district to an R6A medium-density contextual district, as well as a zoning text amendment to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area in Forest Hills, Queens, Community District 6. Next slide. Here's a map of the existing land use and zoning in the surrounding area. The project area was initially zoned R71 in 1961 with the adoption of the zoning resolution and was rezoned in 2002 as part of the Forest Hills Regal Park rezoning, which affected 61 blocks south of Queens Boulevard. The project area is located within a low-density R4B pocket, which is surrounded by an R71 district containing multifamily apartment buildings ranging from 6 to 13 stories in height. The surrounding area has seen a number of rezonings over the past few years, including most recently the 9881 Queens Boulevard rezoning. Next slide. Here's an aerial view with the project area indicated in black and the development site in red. The project area is loosely bounded by Weatherall Street to the south and 67th Avenue to the east and is within the transit zone. The project area is well served by transit and is accessible via the M&R subway lines at the 67th Avenue station, located 2 blocks to the north. It's also served by 7 bus lines. The development site includes lots 49 and 50, which are improved with 2-story, 2-family residential buildings owned by the applicant. Next slide. For additional context, here's a view of the back of the project area looking south. You can see the existing mid-rise multifamily apartment buildings, as well as the Long Island Railroad tracks beyond them. Next slide. Here's a picture of the development site and the existing 2-story residences looking northwest along Weatherall Street. Next slide. And here's an image of the broader project area looking east along Weatherall towards 67th Avenue. Next slide. The applicant is proposing an 8-story, 18,000 square foot building containing 21 dwelling units, 5 to 6 of which would be made affordable pursuant to MIH. The development would contain an FAR of 3.6 and rise to a height of 75 feet. Next slide. The applicant is proposing a zoning map amendment from an R4B to an R6A zoning district. R6A provides medium density and a maximum residential FAR of 3.6. Next slide. The applicant is also seeking a zoning text amendment to map MIH options 1 and 2. Option 1 would provide 25% of residential floor area at an average of 60% AMI, or roughly $62,000 annually for a family of 3. Option 2 would provide 30% of residential floor area at an average of 80% AMI, or about $82,000 annually for a family of 3. For context, Queens Community District 6 has a median income of about $90,000, or about 85% AMI for a family of 3. Next slide. On March 9th, Queens Community Board 6 held public hearing on the application and with 20 in favor, 12 opposed, and none abstaining, approved the application with the following conditions: that the applicant provide deeper and more affordability within the development, including more units below 60% AMI, that they pursue enhanced sustainability goals for the project to limit impacts upon infrastructure, such as passive house, LEED Gold and Platinum, and Enterprise Green Communities requirements, that they commit to providing 30% of jobs for women and minority-owned business enterprises and the hiring of local contractors, that they comply with the Buy American Act, which would include buying domestically made construction materials, and that they hold good faith discussions with local unions to ensure that workers have a prevailing wage and benefit standards, and hold conversations with 32BJ for building worker jobs. Next slide. On April 7th, the Queens Borough President held a public hearing on the application and submitted a recommendation to approve the application with the following conditions: that the applicant meet all of Community Board 6's conditions to the best of their abilities, and that there should be a goal of 30% for local hiring and use of MWBE businesses in the construction and development of the project, and provide quarterly reports on reaching this goal. Next slide. In summary, the applicant is seeking 2 actions: a zoning map amendment to rezone the area from an R4B to an R6A district, as well as a zoning text amendment to establish an MIH area. The proposed development would rise to a height of 75 feet and would include 21 dwelling units and 8 ground floor parking spaces. The applicant will be available for questions during Wednesday's public hearing, but I'm happy to answer any that you may have at this point.
Great. Thanks, Joy. Let me see if there's any questions for you. Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you, Chair. Doesn't this, or wouldn't this rezoning, were it to take effect, doesn't it incentivize the rezoning of the rest of that block? I mean, there's a row house, there's a row of 2-family homes, 1 and 2 family homes, it looks like. And this would displace 2 of those residences. And it would seem to me that this rezoning would serve as an incentive to pursue the rest of the block. I'm sure to the chagrin of those who, the remaining homeowners there, unless of course they wanted to sell, which is always their decision to make. But it seems to me that this would just, give incentive to further redevelopment of that block and change and a wholesale change of the context that was R4A.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment. And that's definitely a concern that the board had when this came before them. There's a lot of conversation about slippery slope of rezonings in the area and sort of concern about what will happen with the neighborhood with this change. But largely the board was supportive of seeing more affordability here. They did understand the rationale for having additional density at an area that's well served by transit. And there is existing mid-density residential along the end block too. So actually not too far from this project area. So on the whole, the board was supportive of this, but that's an excellent comment.
I mean, it looks like it's not atypical from a lot of neighborhoods, including my own, here in the Northeast Bronx. I'm in an R5A district, and there are lots of those neighborhoods that are adjacent to larger apartment buildings in the Bronx and Queens and Brooklyn. So hence my observation.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Commissioner Burney.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Joy, you didn't show them in your presentation, but in our package, there was some floor plan layouts. And they didn't actually show the apartment layouts. They just showed sort of block diagram. And I was trying to figure out with my limited apartment planning skills, how they were going to lay out an apartment with the very limited windows that they seem to have. So I'm hoping on Wednesday they can provide a bit more detailed apartment layout, because I couldn't really see how you get a 2-bedroom apartment in the configuration that they're showing in the diagram.
Absolutely. They'll be ready to talk about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ramprashad.
Yes, thank you. Sticking with the floor plans, yeah, I had mentioned this a while back when they first came to us. I'm just a little not too sure about this trash room. I noticed the floors through 7, and then it just disappears at the ground floor. If they can just clarify that. And also, I'm not sure, does the parking arrangement work? Because I always thought you needed 22 feet to back up. So I'm not too sure. So if they can clarify that at Wednesday's hearing, I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, thank you very much, Joy. We appreciate your presentation, and I see no other questions. So we're going to send this one off to a public hearing on Wednesday. Edwin, I'm going to turn to you to see if we have anything else that we need to discuss today before we close.
Yes, we have a few housekeeping matters. First of all, for Wednesday, April 27th, staff has prepared reports recommending approval for Roundtable Senior Center, which is located in Brooklyn Community District 4, Sutter Place NCP, located in Brooklyn Community District 5, and EMS Station 17, new facility located in Bronx Community District 4. Also recommended for approval in terms of CPC report, 1930 a D Avenue rezoning located in Bronx Community District 12. Additionally, also scheduled for a decision on Wednesday is 415 Edgegrove Avenue, which is located in Staten Island, Community District 3. The certification pursuant to the Special South Richmond District Plan. In terms of post-hearing follow-ups, we have 4541 Furman Avenue rezoning located in Bronx 12. 98 3rd Avenue located in Brooklyn Community District 2. And East 89th Street located in Manhattan Community District 8 on the Upper East Side. Any questions or comments on those items, commissioners?
Any questions, comments? Commissioner Edie?
Thank you. Regarding 3 East 89th Street, and I didn't recall seeing in our package, we were supposed to get some additional information, I thought, from the neighboring building regarding the bedrooms or the apartments that are going to be losing the little light they have already, as it was said to us. Has that come in yet?
I am not sure, but we'll definitely check with staff on that, Commissioner Edie.
Yeah. And I'd like to note that Aska from the Manhattan office is present if she would like to unmute herself and answer some of these questions. Aska?
Hi, yes. The comments from the neighborhood, I think it was in the neighboring building at 1080 East 89th Street, and they did submit something, and that that should be part of what you receive. And if you haven't gotten that, we can make sure that it gets to the commission.
Yeah, I didn't recall seeing it. If you can have that sent to us, I'd appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Great, will do.
Okay, thank you, Aska. We do have one last item, Commissioner.
Wait, before you do that, let me just go to Commissioner Levin and hang on one sec. Commissioner
Yeah,
Levin?
I just wanted to note, in fact, it is in our package, so it was a little bit hard to find, but it's under testimony. It's not under follow-up action.
Thank you.
But that did provoke me to, we're being pressed to look at the whole subject of light and air in a way that we have not been pressed before. There is a 30-foot wide courtyard that belongs to the Fifth Avenue building, but that provides what in any other neighborhood would be ample light and air. I know that light and air has a technical meaning under the zoning resolution, and we've approved, way more drastic incursions into light and air than what is proposed here. So before we get to a vote on this, I'd appreciate some legal guidance from the staff about how we should be understanding this question of light and air. I mean, certainly the consultant, George Janes, has brought new technology to an analysis of the issue. And I certainly understand that the folks in the Fifth Avenue building don't want to see any changes to their current conditions, but we need to put it into appropriate legal context.
Yeah, Commissioner, I think that's a good point, and I learned something about daylighting in that last conversation too. We will tee this up for follow-up, for post hearing follow-up with the commission, and see if we can get some of those questions answered here.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we're not quite done for the day.
No,
go ahead.
We have one more item, our last item, commissioners, for today. In Queens, in Rockaway, Halasala, with representatives from HPD, Kevin Paris and Stephen Erdman, are here to discuss the Resilient Edgemere Community Initiative.
Good afternoon, commissioners. I am here, Halasala. Just going to pass it over to our colleagues at HPD to provide you with an overview of the CLT for Resilient Edgemere.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephen Erdman.
I'm the Director of Community Land Trust Initiatives at HPD, and I'll be presenting today on some information about our community land trust initiatives as a follow-up to the hearing on the Edgemere rezoning. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So the agenda for the presentation, I'll do a quick recap of the Edgemere Community Land Trust request for expressions of interest, and then go into explaining what a CLT is, some details about the CLT project structure when CLTs are working with HPD, some information about why we use the CLT model and how it's valuable for affordable housing, and then an overview of the work that CLTs are doing with HPD across the city, and some specific information about other HPD CLT initiatives. Next slide. So just as a reminder, HPD released CLT RFEI in Edgemere in July. We're looking for partners to respond to the RFEI to propose a way to set up a CLT in the neighborhood. And our idea is to transfer up to 8 acres of city-owned land to the CLT once it's established. That land would be used for public open space as well as affordable homeownership opportunities. And this is all in accordance with commitments made as part of HPD's Resilient Edgemere Community Plan. We're currently reviewing submissions to the RFEI, and we'll be announcing a winning proposal in the coming months. Next slide. So what is a CLT? I think a lot of folks have a general idea of what community land trusts are, but there is some confusion about what exactly we mean by community land trust. So first, very simply, CLTs that work with HPD are nonprofits. They're nonprofit organizations. Specifically, HPD requires them to be nonprofit HDFCs. That helps ensure that housing on CLT's land is used for affordable purposes forever. And it defines a relationship between HPD and the CLTs. CLTs also have a specific mission to own and steward land for the public's benefit. And when they work with HPD, that public benefit is affordable housing and other related community amenities. Something really important about CLTs is that they separate the ownership of land from the ownership of structures on the land. And they enter into long-term ground leases with the owners of those structures, or the building owners. The ground leases typically have a term of 99 years and are renewable. CLTs aren't normal nonprofits. They have unique boards that are typically governed by tripartite structure, meaning that the board is made up of 3 parts. One part represents people who live on the CLT's land, so CLT residents. One part represents stakeholders in the surrounding community, and one part is meant to represent the public at large. HPD also requires that at least 20% of CLT board members have real estate or housing experience, and those members can be part of any of these 3 parts of the tripartite structure. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how we structure CLT projects with HPD. So for single family homes and other small homes like those that would be created in Edgemere on the CLT's land, there's some key differences between traditional affordable homeownership and affordable homeownership that would be on a CLT. So traditionally, when HPD would be conveying land to create traditional affordable homeownership, we'd be able to provide maximum a 20-year UDOT tax exemption. And we would have a subsidy mortgage with the homeowner that for the resources HPD provided to construct the home, and the homeowner would have an end loan with their bank they use to purchase the home. When we put single family homes on a CLT, because a CLT is an HDFC, we're able to apply to the city council to get a 40-year renewable Article 11 tax exemption for the homes. That enables us to put a 40-year HPD regulatory agreement on the land with the CLT, which creates a structure for the CLT to oversee the affordability restrictions for those homes. It also allows us to provide 40 years of tax exemption to the homeowners, and that can be renewed, enabling the ongoing affordability of the structures by bringing down those ongoing costs for the homeowners. This CLT then in turn has a 99-year ground lease with the homeowners that is also renewable. And the homeowners will also have an end loan with the bank that they use to pay to purchase their home. Next slide. This is just an overview of that same information, a little bit different illustration. This shows the high-level legal agreements between the different parties for single-family homeownership projects on CLTs with HPD. So you'll see that HPD has a regulatory agreement with the CLT. HPD has a subsidy mortgage with the homeowners. It may also have a subsidy mortgage with the CLT, depending on the project's financing. And then the CLT has a ground lease with the homeowners. So affordability and other important restrictions are enforced by HPD with the CLT, and in turn, the CLT enforces those same requirements with the homeowners directly. Next slide, please. Okay, so now that I've explained the structure, I want to go a little bit into why this structure is helpful and what we actually get out of it. So first, just want to call to everyone's attention that HPD uses many tools to ensure a lot of the goals that CLTs have to achieve those goals with other affordable housing projects that don't necessarily use the CLT structure. So we're able to create long-term and permanent affordability and ensure that buildings are well maintained through the regulatory agreements that HPD uses, balloon mortgage financing, reverter provisions, third-party monitoring requirements for co-op projects, et cetera, et cetera. We have a variety of tools. And the CLT model is one of those tools in our toolkit that we found particularly useful in certain scenarios, especially homeownership projects, like the ones that we're expecting in Edgemere. So first, as I've mentioned, that bifurcation of property ownership enables the CLT to enforce affordability and other requirements in collaboration with HPD. And that is through that structure, that regulatory structure that I already summarized. National evidence shows that CLTs help reduce foreclosures among low-income households. And part of the idea here is that the ground lease that CLTs have with homeowners requires homeowners to pay a monthly ground rent to the CLT. It's a small fee. And if a homeowner is not keeping up with that ground rent on a monthly basis, it can be an early warning signal to the CLT that there may be bigger issues that are brewing, and can give a signal to the CLT to step in and make sure the homeowner isn't getting behind on mortgage payments or municipal charges or other things that could threaten the homeowner's stability in their home. That ground rent also provides resources to the CLT that it can pool for the collective benefit of all of the residents on the CLT. And some of the things that CLTs do with that ground rent is provide home repair loans and emergency mortgage assistance to homeowners, as well as homeownership training and counseling, high-risk loan prevention, and other services that help low-income homeowners be successful. And lastly, that tripartite structure provides the CLT with a sense of checks and balances that enables it to be effective and fair as it oversees project requirements and enforces affordability and other restrictions with its homeowners. Next slide. CLTs are also a way to formalize community control of land via that tripartite structure. And this provides an avenue for residents of a neighborhood, as well as residents on the CLT's land, to influence the way that land is governed as it's used for affordable housing or other related amenities. And so this is particularly meaningful in Edgemere, where we do expect the CLT to help decide how to program and then steward for the long term up to 55 currently vacant city-owned lots that will be used for public open space. And so we do see here the CLT structure putting some formal bones to the way community input would be used to program these spaces. Next slide. Just a really quick summary of CLTs across the US. The first CLT, what's often pointed to as the first CLT, was established in 1969 by a group of Black farmers in Southwest Georgia. And now there's nearly 300 CLTs operating in almost every state. And there's roughly 35,000 units of housing on those CLTs, both homeownership and rental. The largest CLT is the Champlain Housing Trust, that steers over 3,000 units of housing in Vermont. And the Grounded Solutions Network is one national umbrella organization that provides technical assistance to many CLTs in the US. Next slide. So in New York City, the use of the CLT model has not been as widespread as it has been in other parts of the country. The Cooper Square CLT, as some of you may be familiar with, is one example of a CLT that's been operating successfully in the long term. It got started in the 1990s in the East Village. In 2017, with much of the work that had been done by advocates in the city leading up to that point, HPD released a request for expressions of interest for proposals for how CLTs could be set up across the city. And HPD ultimately selected 9 of those respondents to participate in a 2-year CLT learning exchange. These groups and many others are now organized under the umbrella of the New York City Community Land Initiative, or NYCLI, with support from the New Economy Project. And the New Economy Project and its partners were responsible for running that learning exchange with the CLT groups. And many of these groups are currently working with HPD, or they're working to build their capacity and to establish partnerships with affordable housing groups that they'll need to support affordable housing projects on any land they come to own. And then in terms of how CLTs are funded at this stage, HPD has facilitated a series of grants from Enterprise. Enterprise has used Attorney General settlement funds from the 2008 housing crisis, and has made those grants to support CLT initiatives across the city. And the New York City Council, as many of you may be aware, has provided grants to CLTs over the past 3 fiscal years, and that's helped pay for some level of operations and other sources for CLTs, other uses for CLTs. Next slide. So HPD has provided capital assistance as well as tax exemptions for 3 specific CLT projects so far. And these projects are part of an effort that includes over 1,000 units of affordable housing that we plan to ultimately be operating on CLTs that we're working on right now. So first, in March of 2020, we provided some rehab financing and a new Article 11 tax exemption to the Cooper Square CLT. And then in November of 2020, we provided another rehab loan as well as title to 4 city-owned properties and an Article 11 tax exemption to the East Harlem El Barrio CLT. They're working on rehabbing the buildings with their partners to create a 36-unit mutual housing association rental project. And then this past February, we provided the Interborough CLT and its partner Habitat for Humanity a construction loan, another Article 11 tax exemption that they will use to create 16 single-family homes on 13 sites that were formerly owned by NYCHA. Next slide. That's it. Okay, thank you. I'll take any questions that you all have.
Thank you very much. You seemed almost surprised that that last slide was the thank you. That's great. Thank you very much, Stephen. We appreciate it. Let me ask a couple of quick questions. So the Community Land Trust sounds like it's going to do a couple of component parts. It's going to do the facilitating of the new housing, and it's also going to be dealing with programming and maintaining the open spaces that exist. Tell me a little bit about the open space management and engagement, if you can. I'd like to hear just a little bit more about that.
So that is something that will need to be planned with the group that HPD selects to establish the CLT. And so a lot of exactly how that will look will be determined by that group and by HPD at a later stage. So part of the idea is that we need to pick a partner to establish a CLT to create like this formalized way that all of the relevant stakeholders will be influencing the planning of those open space sites.
Okay, got it. Okay, and if, let's say you go through the RFEI, you select a nonprofit, and I know you're going to pick the right person, whoever it is, the right entity, whoever it is, of course. But what happens if that not-for-profit does not have success. They either dissolve or they're unable to meet the responsibilities. What happens then? What is the legal process? To whom does ownership revert? Would there be another RFP? How does that work exactly?
Right. So, up until the point where HPD is actually conveying land to the CLT, if things go awry, we would, be able to work with another group, prior to the actual conveyance of the land. After the point that the land is conveyed, that would all be conveyed subject to an HPD regulatory agreement. So the slides earlier on in the presentation, I think, show, how HPD would actually have a regulatory agreement with the CLT. In that regulatory agreement, there are remedies enumerated that if the CLT doesn't uphold all of the requirements of the regulatory agreement, just like any affordable housing project that has a regulatory agreement with HPD, HPD could pursue those remedies, which could include bringing on another partner to take over the work of the CLT. It could be another CLT, for example.
Okay. So that's written into the regulatory agreement.
Yes.
Okay.
Or that's the plan. Yes, that it would be written into
regulatory. It will be, not yet, but it will be. Right. Yes. Okay. Vice Chair Knuckles.
No, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you because I had asked for more information and an orientation on CLTs, and this is very informative. So thank you.
Great. Excellent. Let's see if there are any other questions or comments here. Great. I see none. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for the presentation. And we will be voting on the Edgemere plan at a later date, but we appreciate that information. And Edwin, back to you for good and welfare, if there is any.
Yes, we do have one more item, our last item. We're going to revisit 3 East 89th Street and chat a little bit about that.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So before I get into this, just say this is for another issue. So, I mean, we took the questions you asked and we're going to follow up on that, but this is to discuss a proposed modification. So this application by 3 East 89th Holding LLC was presented to the Commission at the last public hearing on April 13th. Next slide, please. The site is located at 3 East 89th Street in Carnegie Hill, Community District 8, Manhattan. The applicant is requesting a special permit pursuant to Section 74-711 to modify use and look requirements to facilitate the renovation, conversion, and enlargement of a building in the expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District. The use waiver will enable a commercial art gallery where it is currently not permitted, and the bulk waiver will enable the proposed enlargement of approximately 5,300 square feet. Next slide. The image on the right illustrates the floor area of the proposed enlargement is distributed across the 6-story building. Floors 2 through 4 are proposed to have infill on the rear and side of the building, and 5th floor is proposed to enlarge to the full extent of the enlarged 4th floor, and the 6th floor is to contain a new penthouse addition. Next slide. So as you recall, the Community Board 8 approved the application on February 9, 2022, but urged the applicant to consider 2 recommendations made by the Carnegie Hill neighbors. The first recommendation was to reconfigure the penthouse on the roof to allow more light and air into the 1085th Avenue inner court. And the second was to reduce the angle of the rear addition to allow more light and air into 1083 Fifth Avenue. In response to the second recommendation, the department is recommending a modification to the 4th and 5th floors. Next slide, please. The department recommends that part of the 4th and 5th floor rear addition that ends in a triangular shape be reconfigured and squared off in the rear as seen in these plan drawings. This modification will not only address the community concern related to the rear addition, but also reduce the requested rear yard waiver. Per the ZR section 23-47, the required rear yard on this site is 30 feet. Under the current application, no rear yard is provided on the 4th and 5th floors, with the triangular end of the addition extending to the rear lot line. Through this modification, a 5-foot rear yard will be provided on these 2 floors. The department recommends this modification for the Commissioner's consideration. We believe it is within scope and appropriate for this application. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. very much. Now, we've got our follow-up questions, and then we have this modification. So we're going to separate those two points. So let me see if there are questions or comments for you, Aska, from the commission. Okay, Commissioner Levin.
Then just to be clear, Aska, you are therefore not making any recommendation with respect to moving the rooftop enlargement around.
No, so this is strictly for the rear yard.
Okay, okay. Yes. Thank you.
Great, and we do have the opportunity to discuss this further at the next and final review session before we will be voting on this item. Let me just see if there are other questions here. Okay. All right, Aska, thank you very much for that. Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Edwin, back to you.
Yes, first of all, thank you, commissioners. We are done for today, Chair Garodnick. We have no further business before the commission today.
I mean, it's really. I mean, it's so early in the day. We were hoping that there'd be at least another half dozen items. All right, thank you, Edwin, for all of your stewardship today. We really appreciate it, commissioners. We will see you on Wednesday, and thanks to all who are watching and to the staff of the Department of City Planning. As always, thank you for all the great work. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.